morning, everybody. I'm just going to put Bruce's hat on for 30 seconds. So that's who I am at this present point in time. And I'm going to open the Finance and Assurance meeting for the day, and I'm going to move that we adjourn it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. So now I'll put my hat back on and I'll open up the council meeting for the day, and I'll kick off with our opening karakia. Mā te whakarongo, mā te kōrero, mā te nākau, mā te wārua, mā te manaki mai, mā te manaki atu, ka pua wai te maramatanga, tihei, mauri. Through listening, through talking, from the heart, from the spirit, through giving and receiving respect, understanding will bloom. This is the essence of life. Thank you. Welcome along to our council meeting today. Welcome to Bobby and Charlie, and we've got some new staff members up the back too, so welcome Gavin as well. And we've got Sarah and Jaspreet coming in online too. So standard procedures, our toilets are out the door there on your right. If we need to evacuate for any reason, please go down the stairs and out onto Space Street. If we could please make sure our phones are on silent, and these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video, both live streaming and downloading. So by remaining in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed by the public. So an apology for lateness from Councillor Running-Claw. Further apologies. Councillor Keys.
I'm not sure which meeting it'll be in. Down there from today.
So just for a short period of time and you'll be back. Further apologies. Someone like to move those? Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Do we have any leave of absence coming up?
6th of November, please.
6th of November until?
Just for that one.
For that one meeting. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Seconder, Councillor Spragan. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Do we have any conflict of interest for any item on the agenda today? I doubt it. There being none, we don't have any extraordinary urgent items. We've got our council minutes from our last meeting on the 2nd of October on page 6. Is someone happy to move those? True and correct. Councillor Keys, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Right. We have our first report today, and it is great to have Great South in the room. Charmy and Bobby, welcome along. This is on page 123 of your agenda, and it's the Great South quarterly update to council. And I believe you're hosting the EDAs from up and down the country, so you're probably in a bit of a hurry to get back out again. So I won't waste any further time, and I'll hand over to you two. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, councillors. It's so good to be back in your council chambers, and we're excited. While it is a quarterly update, it is also the end of year for 23-24. I understand we do have only 30 minutes, and it's a pretty full agenda you have, so I'm going to whip through some of the achievements and leave the conversation to Bobby, who will take us through some of the exciting projects that are hopefully going to be progressed. I believe I'm back on the 6th of November maybe, or somewhere around that, to do a workshop with the councillors for our next letter of expectation. So I hope to, we hope to carry on some of this work during that, depending of course how the councillors feel about it. But for me, let's move on to what Great South has done in the 23-24 financial year. As you know, our vision is to enable even better lives through sustainable regional development. And in order to do that, we work across 4 priority areas, which the council, the 9 shareholders workshopped with us last year in May and then again in August, and we identified that these were the 4 sort of priority pillars that we're going to work against. So regional development leadership, which was actually morphed from the Beyond 2025 piece of work that we did in the previous year. regional promotions, including the work we do against Visit Fiordland and Visit Southland, business support and diversification, and that's one of our government-held contracts that we have with RBP and Callaghan, and of course the work we do with businesses to support them on their decarbonisation journey. So we did have a challenging year, as you all know. So with the government change, we had a new coalition government. Most of our government contracts came to an end, and we find ourselves in a tight financial environment, as does everybody else in Aotearoa. However, we are very proud of the achievements that we have been able to achieve. Last year, regional promotions was quite exceptional. We had strong progress in business events, and Great South hosted or supported a tech conference that's a Tourism Export Council's conference in August this year, which saw about 320 people from outside of our region come and explore. So we had pre and post itineraries that spread across the Southland region. We also had a good cruise season last December, January, February, 17 cruise ships that saw a sizable boost to our economy from the passengers coming on shore. And we're very, very proud to support Mayor Rob and the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. Really good outcomes. We achieved what we had to do in the first 6 months of this year, and currently we have 5 sustainable placements that we need to achieve before the end of December, and we're at 4 at the moment, so we're in a position there as well. As you know, Beyond 2025 won an award from Economic Development New Zealand's integrated strategy for the best integrated strategy, and then Great South Sustainability Program also was recognised by Business South. Councillors will be aware that Great South had to go through a restructure at the end of the year. 11 positions, either through natural attrition and or redundancies were made. So a reduced staff, but we had to do this. We have to become more targeted and focused, and that's where we are now. So I think I'll just go through this focus areas just to give a flavour to the councils. We had 7 areas across those 4 pillars, 16 KPIs all up, and out of those 16 KPIs, we had 4 that were partially achieved. Everything else was achieved. The 4 that were partially achieved, 3 of them were related to business confidence and small and medium businesses that we deal with not focusing on capability building and professional development. So that's really the 3 KPIs under our decarb area and RBP area. And the other one was we had to do a feasibility report for business events in Gore, and that we couldn't quite complete last year. But other than that, all of the other KPIs were there. Our annual report is now live on our website, and we had a really good financial ending as well, which was very positive for us, from a deficit forecast to a slight marginal profit margin was where we landed for the end of last year. Yes, so I don't think I'll actually go through this because it's really touching on the KPIs. So 3 KPIs for Beyond 2025 we achieved. I'm not sure if the slide deck is shared with the councillors.
I think we're just doing that at the moment.
Okay, so do you want me to go through this, or can I leave it to?
You can probably, we've got the slide deck sheets. If you want to carry on, then we can have a look at it.
Okay.
And I'm sure you'll take any questions from anyone.
Yes. Okay, so Beyond 25, 3 KPIs, all of them were achieved, and Bobby will talk further on that, so I won't dwell too much on this. Attraction of visitors to Murihiku Southland. Now, this was an area I think councillors will be a little bit more interested in because we get additional funding from Southland District Council for our Visit Fiordland office. It's what I'd like to highlight here is last year we also with the restructure we've put a re-emphasis on Tiano becoming and Manapuri becoming the gateway to Fiordland and the Sounds. And we've also restructured our general manager for tourism and events, Mark Frood. We've given him a permanent position now, and he's based in Tiano. So it's just to put that emphasis on how important the work in that area is for our region. We had 612 media results, and Fiordland social media was about 114% growth. We established the walking guides and the Milford Road maps as well for the Southland area. Building Tiano as the gateway to Piopiotahi and the wider Southland area, what our main achievements in that area was the famils that we had. So we had Tourism New Zealand travel trade famil with a host of UK agents come to Fiordland in April. We had the Trends famil, so that was before the Trends conference was held in Wellington. We had post and pre and post itineraries in Fiordland. So the people who were attending trade came down to Southland. And then Kiora magazine, so we partnered with Air New Zealand to do a section on the Southern Way, and that was a 4-page spread, and it was over 800,000 views from that particular campaign. Sustainable tourism, we ran the 3rd Sustainable Tourism webinar, and we had a focus group in Tiano regarding capability building to support operators. Food tourism, we've updated the Murihiku Eats food guide and good food guide, and there is plenty of hospitality providers from Southland region in that food guide. And of course, we continue to do our work with Dark Sky. So Piopiotahi, we're working hard and working with the lighting owners in Fiordland National Park to support them to amend in order for us to become compliant and build Fiordland as a dark sky sanctuary. And that complements the work that we've done out over at Stewart Island. And lastly, the cycle tourism part. So we've got the Southland Regional Trails Entity Report, and Great South will now do a high-level proposal on what funding and support is needed if we were to progress any of those recommendations from that report, and then we'll bring it back to councils and our joint shareholders for a decision on whether they want us to prioritise that or not. And given that there are so many priorities, we understand that it may not meet the criteria. So, but anyway, we'll do that work. Tourism sector development, so I said 2 KPIs in this area, and one was about the feasibility of business events in Gore, which we haven't quite finalised yet. So one KPI was achieved and one was partially achieved. We had a piece of work to do on alternative land use, and that KPI was achieved. Business engagement, like I mentioned before, the small, medium businesses that we were supporting, we had a KPI of 280 businesses. We only engaged with about 250. However, this was over and above the KPIs or the deliverables that we had to meet for the MB contract that we had for RBP and Callaghan. So it was a stretch target for us. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a slowing with business confidence waning earlier this year. 3 KPIs in carbon emissions reduction, and again, businesses weren't keen to engage in the decarbonisation program as much as we anticipated, and anecdotally, the information that came back to us was that they're just too busy trying to solve the business's problem instead of being able to have that time to look at upskilling and capability building. And data and dashboards, the 2 KPIs that we had under this, the repository was designed and the dashboards have been developed, and Bobby will take you forward on that note to show you exactly what we've done. I'll hand it over to Bobby now.
Awesome. Okay, nice to see everybody. Thanks again for having us. I've spoken about DISH, which is Data and Insights Southland Hub, for a little bit. Remember, the key reasons why we did this project was when we went through the regional plan development, the data available, there wasn't much. What was there was sometimes interpreted differently by different parties. There was a bit of duplication with a lot of us purchasing the same data sets. So, and the last point was that people couldn't find data sets. It was sort of spread out across lots of places. So the main purpose of DISH, which is southlanddata.nz, is that we just make it really easy for people to find key data and information about the region. So we do have a bit of a system in the back end which allows us to do some analysis on the data sets in it. So it's not just pulling feeds from websites, but and we'll talk about that later because we'll be able to create reports for our councils and shareholders and some analysis, particularly with housing. But the beauty of this is that it's a conduit. So we partnered with the government. So there's a pilot happening at the moment where they're looking at data from different ministries and putting it on a portal. So we just link direct into this. So you just need to go to one place and you're connected through to different areas. The other good thing about this is as we have a plan and we have these lovely goals, we need to be able to measure success. So that's why the areas we focused on were housing, tourism, environment, and economy. So we want to actually show what is the benefit or the impact or the output of the work that you're paying for through Great South and other things that are happening. So that's why just understanding those trends and seeing figures is really important part of the big picture. Okay, so I've just circled there our council's area of focus, which is what we're going to be working with each of the councils soon to populate. And just probably want to have a shout out to your staff. They've been amazing. Actually, all of the councils have, because Great South does not operate separate to the councils. Like while we interface with private sector government, it's really important what we do provides efficiencies for you guys. And, you know, there's really big opportunities. And I've really loved that this project has probably realised the opportunities for shared services and more alignment coming up in regards to data. So thank you. That's an example of the economic page. So as you can see, we've just got a bit of an explanation. So probably just to note that yes, the media is right. We are at an all-time high for GDP at 8.27 billion. Probably the more impressive figure is the $80,143 per person per capita. So that is the third highest in New Zealand after Wellington and Auckland. So we've overtaken Taranaki. There is a bit of a lag with GDP data, so take that. And sometimes when you see it and you think, gosh, that sounds great, but then you're aware of other things going on, it's due to the lag in the data. Some other points on that Power BI dashboard is that we've taken some new calculations for export, because at the moment about 40% of everything we make or produce in the region is exported from our ports, so the airport and Southport, but 60% goes out from other ports. So it's important when you guys have to consider provision of bridges, roading, water, infrastructure in general, you need to get a really fair understanding of the full value of export and what that means to our economy. So we've just done some calculations, split it out over pastoral, primary, and we can talk through. With the EDA visit this week, we're actually talking to them about aligning with our methodology, because then we can lobby together as regions, MPI, to get some better data measurement. So you'll be able to go on to DISH. There's some information, we have some commentary, we'll be developing regular reports, probably 3 monthly, where we just have standardised GDP, export, unemployment rate, by the way, is 3.7%, and you can rely on that data coming out. We're also going to ask you around what your data needs are, and we've just started those conversations with your staff. So what do you need it to report against, what KPIs? You guys will be doing an environmental scan. You know, for the processes, you know, we can provide stuff for that as well.
What is the lag time for the information, and is that updated?
Yeah, it varies. Really good question, because this is only as good as, you know, you can trust that. So GDP can be up to 2 years, but some of the other data, so the arrivals from Invercargill Airport comes every month. So we just made sure when you scroll over each data set, you can see exactly the time period for where that data comes from. Milford Sound passenger numbers, they come in monthly. Stewart Island visitor levy, I think we're 3 monthly for that one. And that's been the challenge of trying to put it together, because you have to make sure it's quite clear.
So even with the exports, you can track that monthly, what goes out of...
Yeah, no, a wee bit trickier exports. Yeah, we might actually come back another day and have a chat to you about exports. It's quite complicated, but it's going to be very, very important going forward, because the government's quite clearly said they're quite keen for us to contribute to the country doubling exports. There's quite a few questions around how that could happen. Okay. Right, yeah, and that's just a page. Thank you, Paul Duffy and South Catlins Trust, and also Te Hikoi Visitor Centre, because what you guys have done is provided your data into Dish. And again, when you start to get a picture, like there's no one absolute way to know how many people are coming, but what we'll do is create a picture where you can start to see, so then your roading team, your other guys can start to see, right, well, that road's quite important because, 750,000 people go to Milford, 40,000 to the island. And what we like about this is it doesn't have boundaries, so you can start to see tourism and other movement of people, visitors. The next bit with Dish, so we will launch Dish formally on the 12th of November, and from there we will look at spatial planning data, and there's a lot of work going on with Environment Southland at the moment. So we know that's a key focus for Southland District Council, and what we hope to be able to do is Vibhuti and the team start your process is to say, right, here are the data sets which we agree, this is where they're housed, this is how they're modelled, so you can trust that those apples will compare to other people's apples. So even though you do your spatial planning at different times and stages, they can be compared. So that's the next bit. Lots of opportunity. We probably are surprised by how much of a gap this was, and how it's sort of been embraced by lots of different people, whether it's government, even central government, they're all over this. It makes us, when you do advocacy, when you want to know what stats are, they're going to be here. Okay, so just a couple of points about housing. So remember, we have 2.3% of all of New Zealand's homes. The reason why we're looking at housing, we all know we've got the wrong houses for our people, and it's going to get worse as our population changes. But one of the key reasons from an economic development agency is that 53% of businesses told us that housing is a barrier for them to gear up and do more. So that's quite a significant figure, and you think, well, yes, we want to encourage economic development, but we've got to understand some of these enablers. And that's probably a key message, is that it's all connected. So even when we talk about aquaculture, yes, we've got we've got regulation that may enable more things to happen, but if we don't have the workforce or supply chain, or they've got housing, then that can't be realised. You've got to look at it all together. So just really quickly, we've been playing quite a key role with working with different industry as they come in. What kind of housing do you need? Are you going to provide it? Where would you put it? We've been talking to government quite a bit, because there's probably not too much clarity on some of the housing positions at this stage, and it connects to a lot of things. So we're looking forward to some of that coming up, but advocacy is extremely important at the moment. Council support and alignment, so to acknowledge your housing plan and the work that Teresa's done with that, excellent. We're trying to encourage all of the councils to go, right, what's their role? We regulate it, we enable it, we provide infrastructure, some of us provide it. So that's really important, because remember, we have people that live in one place, they live in another, and they cross boundaries. So we want to make sure that housing is boundaryless in terms of how we look at it. And the final thing we've done is strategic planning. So we've tried to look at efficiencies across the region and councils and say, right, what are the 13 things that we need to do? So we've created a draft plan, and that very confusing looking slide just gives you an idea of the 5 things that we will have achieved by the end of this business year. So you can see some data in there. So again, if you're a homeowner and you want to understand the value of your house, you go to Dish. We're working with Adrian and the team and the other councils around looking at building consent, resource consent processes, just to make sure from a consumer perspective that angle was coming in, so it's easy for people to come in here, because the market are the ones that will provide a lot of the solutions for housing. So we just got to listen to them, but it's also been really valuable to listen to the councils and see efficiencies across and opportunities. And then there's a couple of other things in there around how we just do it better together. So how we line up with your spatial planning, because remember, we do not want to build houses where it's going to flood and people won't get insurance, or where Section 73s come in. And, you know, we want to make sure what we do is responsible and appropriate. Okay, so moving on, just a couple of more stats for you guys, and I've got a couple of slides after this. But look, you have 36.1% of all of Southland's homes. You do have slightly younger aged homes than elsewhere in the region. A lot of that is in some places like Tiana, where you've seen some good rebuilding and infill. You have got accelerating rents compared to the rest of New Zealand. So 80% since 2018 compared to 41% for New Zealand. So a lot of this will be backing up some of the feedback you're getting from your communities. The stats definitely show that it's happening. There's growing rental unaffordability, so it's gone up, but at the same time, you're still very affordable. Southland in general is. So rents are about 1/3 cheaper, and you can still buy 2 houses for the price of the national average. I'll show you that in a second. Your house values have grown 6% in the last year, which is more than ICC, but around half the rate of Gore. So Gore's about 14.45%. So you've got to look at that because something's happening. You can't look at these stats individually if one area is growing or one isn't. People won't look at councils, they'll live where they can. And so you are still the second most invested TA in the country for public housing investment from government. Just really quickly, so that this just shows you here your average house price and affordability. So this is a snapshot from Dish. This is the kind of data you'll be able to find. And I'll just move on quick. In terms of weekly median rent, again, you've had cheaper rents and you've had a very stable time through the 90s up to the early 2000s, but see how the line is definitely going up, and in some ways it's more steeper than the rest of New Zealand, so that shows that growth. So that last 6 years in particular, we've seen quite a significant acceleration. So we're catching up. In terms of rental affordability, they look at how much of your household income is used to pay your rent, and so that's the index. And so look, it's the same sort of story. See how the lines are kind of getting the same towards the end? So that's just showing that you're growing, and nationally it's dropping. Really interesting. That's what that says. And finally, in terms of mortgage serviceability, we are seeing deteriorating or challenging ability for people with cost of living. So what we do is we calculate how much of your household income goes towards your mortgage, and it's normally around, it does vary, but you guys, we're just seeing it's getting tough. So the stats do bring that up. And remember, we have less income in terms of compared to other parts of the country. So it's all relative as well. Okay, just 2 more slides. Aquaculture. Okay, so last weekend we had some announcements from the government around 3 significant size applications to go through the Fast Track Approvals Act process, which should be progressed by the end of the year. So that is very significant. Remember, Beyond 25 talked about $1 billion in sales from aquaculture, and it was a key diversification opportunity. Up till now, regulation and provision of infrastructure are probably the 2 things which have meant that hasn't been realised. So this is quite significant. It's definitely a priority for government, and there's lots of pieces of legislation that are being looked at through national policy statements, through coastal plans. So the announcement last week is really interesting. We've been quite busy working through, because it won't happen quickly at all. But things like the coastal plan, we need to make sure that it is regulated appropriately so we have the right activity in the right place. But we also need to make sure we can benefit from this opportunity. So that is going to be that we have workers, they're trained, that they can live in the place, so there's housing, that our businesses have the ability to service this new sector, which could take a couple of years to get going. So from a business angle, we've got to work early with them, build up. But also infrastructure will be significant. Does the infrastructure align with your spatial planning, with Rakura, with Bluff? And the infrastructure will be expensive, and there are a whole lot of other competing uses for that infrastructure if you think of wharves and ports and roads and export, etc. So beginning of a process, our role at the moment has been to link up quite a few different conversations. So we had a workshop with the coastal plan at ES last week, which we really enjoyed. That's going to come back to you guys around infrastructure. Your spatial plan will link in. Yeah, so yeah, quite big. That just shows that what we also do is try to say, well, what does this aquaculture thing mean? You know, how do you get $1 billion in sales? Oh, actually, that means we need, 3,000 more people to work in the sector. Where do we get them from? So we do it on scenarios, so then how we approach it is a little bit more controlled. And then if something changed, you can go back to your scenario and go, well, yep, that's different. We've got some new automation now. That means we don't need as many workers. Last slide, that just basically explains what I just said. Our 3 fast tracks are Sanford, Ngātahu Seafood, which is the Hananui project off Rakiura, and Impact Marine, which is land-based salmon. There are also a number of applications which will go through in Schedule 2, which we've been told will probably be 18 to 24 months. But that doesn't mean we're not working with them, because the infrastructure will be shared. So the benefit is to make it make sense. That's it.
Awesome. Can't beat good data, eh? It's so when you look at this aquaculture that's suddenly ramping up, and I think we discussed at one of the JSC, George Shareholder Committee meetings, in terms of Great South thing to be agile, to suddenly almost drop everything and then suddenly start working towards that. But it also highlights, you talked about another 3,000 jobs needed for aquaculture, which needs housing, so it's all kind of interconnected. So all the other pieces of work that you're doing kind of in the data inform all of that as well. So it's a big jigsaw puzzle with a whole lot of pieces that you're putting in place. So it's been a very big year for you too. So thank you for the great work that you've done. We have got a couple of minutes probably for questions. Are there any questions from the?
Thank you. It's probably just a comment rather than a question. That it's actually heartening to see that we had the report beyond 2025. Seems like a long time ago. The importance is it hasn't just been a report, it's the ongoing work that we're seeing here in implementation in the areas. So, and just to have the addition and the formal launch in November is excellent, because it's really quite a short time from the production of the report to the implementation. So it's very heartening to see it. Congratulations.
Can I just comment? I just probably want to say thank you to you guys, because it has happened because we invested in Great South, and we wouldn't be able to do it. And there's also going to be a report on the first 12 months come out in the next month or so. We'll have that in time for our AGM, and that will also show that while we've done some cool stuff, there's lots of other people that have achieved things in the plan too. So yeah, it's something we're probably really quite proud of, aren't we? And it's working, which is the main thing, eh?
And I just wanted to check through you, Chair. We've sent out invitations. We just want the RSVPs and making sure that everybody's received an invitation to the launch?
For the 12th of November.
Yes. Yeah. And also the regional summit. I'm just taking this opportunity. Sorry. The regional summit is on the 15th of November, and again, the councillors have all been invited. Have you received your? If you haven't received your invitations, please let me know. I can coordinate through Cameron's office, and if it hasn't gone out to you, I'll get one sent immediately. Thank you.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Do you get any recognition through government funding to help sort of, when all this agriculture comes into play, do you get funded to help sort of facilitate that?
Through the chair, no. So through the Beyond 25 process and Just Transitions, there was a request for some funding through MPI to support the coordination, but what seems to be the trend is to fund projects to sort of get completed at the moment. So that coordination is sort of coming back to sort of be absorbed within regions. So we'll keep looking. A lot of the funds are no longer in government that were there before. Like as Charmy said, it's quite a tight financial environment, but we just have to wait to see what comes out, be ready with data to present business cases to access what we can.
Yeah, I think the key is being ready to strike if anything becomes available, and having all the plans and data and background all in place. We can basically, as soon as something comes up, go, there you go, pre-prepared. fund us, please. Councillor Duffy.
And on the slide to do with the economy, where we've got the various sectors broken down, there's manufacturing at 1.1 and primary at 1.8. Does the manufacturing include likes of the processing of the dairy and stuff?
Yeah, a really good point through the chair. So there are 404 NZIC codes. So the way that we group sales and GDP comes in, it's very, very complicated stuff I never wanted to know. So what we've tried to do is make it meaningful for how we present it. So when on the website, you can scroll over that and it tells you exactly what primary sector is. Because like tourism, for example, crosses over multiple areas, and primary in that case includes agriculture and aluminium, so manufacturing.
And the freezing works processing is manufacturing as well?
Yeah, correct.
Right.
So whatever is on there, you'll be able to see, so you'll know exactly what the definition is, because there's just no, like we might have another look at that one.
It really shows how much primary really contributes when you include that.
Yeah. Absolutely huge.
Okay.
It's our backbone.
Yeah.
And having all that data there is really useful in terms of like the advocacy that I'm doing at the moment, to be able to actually put solid data that you can relate to and show, and it's there, and it helps with that piece of doubling exports to the country and showing what Southland actually does for that. But I'll take a final question from Councillor O'Brien, and then we're going to carry on.
Thank you for the report, Shami and Bobby. Probably following on from Derek's comment around your answer around central government and where it sees its role in terms of subsidising, or the way you want to look at it. I'm aware that some of the 140 fast track applications that have been accepted by government so far, I am aware that some of those will be granted on the provision of external funding from private investment, equity, and so on. Has Great South taken into account, with regards to the investment going into this aquaculture entity, the level of engagement with the private sector in terms of how we can, I suppose, cement a bit more of a business case, so that the government can sort of say, well, you guys are doing a great job, you clearly don't really need our help too much, we'll do as much as we possibly can from a legislative perspective to help you realise your goals?
Yep, so through the chair, the answer is early stages, yes, that is the goal. Two key things will happen. One is we're refreshing the regional aquaculture strategy now, and so that'll be finished by middle of next year. That is the pathway. So how you say $1 billion, but how are you going to get there? Because it's going to be contributions of private sector, number of investment, shared, so that will be important. And then the second bit is around the fast track process. We're working with government at the moment around aligning the regional infrastructure fund, so other tools that government has. So instead of spreading it out to try to get the winners over the line, well, not winners, it's the wrong word, but, rather than spreading resources. So it's more of a targeted approach. Early stages, Don, like it's, we've only been in the aquaculture space in this coordination role very recently, and that's because we're working very closely with Ngāi Tahu, very aligned with the approach. So we're sort of finding our feet in terms of resourcing and that as well. So that, as Jeremy said, we've sort of added this on to other things we're doing. So it's sort of balancing our ability to...
And through you, Chair, so that will be, I think, a discussion also at the Letter of Expectation workshop, Tom, so that if this is a priority, we hope that we will have regional priorities highlighted through the Letter of Expectation that will enable us to then allocate those resources. Just on that also, though, these three projects, some of these three projects and some of the others that are in the second tranche, they have had like marginal sort of commissionable contracts given to us to support them with some of the technical data that they need. So there is that avenue as well. But it's, like Bobby said, very early stages, and we hope to get more clarity once we have the Letter of Expectation, and then we can repurpose what we have to do to support what needs to be done over the next few years.
Just through the chair, one final wee thing. A lot of the applicants haven't done their full business case assessments yet, because the consent processes can take years, And so it can be a very different situation from the day one when you're granted. So now the confidence from the fast track process has meant they're going right. So they don't actually know the costs, they don't know the level of investment. So I think it's going to take time, but getting the bits aligned, I think, is probably quite important.
Very important. Yeah, no, good luck with it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much once again for coming along. We've got a recommendation here that we received the report. I'm going to add to that and acknowledge the great work that you've done over the last 12 months and the work that you're carrying on doing over the next 12 months. It's busy times ahead, but thank you on behalf of us and on behalf of Southland as well. It's great to have you guys doing the work.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll move to hear that we received the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. Enjoy the rest
Thank
of your
you. Thank you, councillors. Have a good day.
Okay, our next item is 7.2, the adoption of the Code of Practice for Subdivision, Land Use and Development 2023 and notification of the proposed plan change. From the headline, and this is on page 125 of the agenda, and welcome Peter and Ashton to the table again.
Thank you. Good morning. This is probably a great day, as far as I'm concerned, to be here. We've managed to bring this to this point, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. We've had some ups and we've had some downs, but we're here now. I have got some very brief introductory remarks, and then I was just going to ask if there's any questions, because I think it's more important that the councillors get a chance to ask questions of us. There's an awful lot of paper. I thought I'd bring it just so you can see that we haven't just been sitting around not doing very much, and it doesn't look much on your computer until you come to download it, but it's pretty substantial. So the staff are here today, and myself and Gavin, to request two decisions of the council. The first is that you adopt the Code of Practice for Subdivision, Land Use and Development 2023. And the second is that you adopt Plan Change 2 and the Section 32 evaluation report, and having adopted them, you approve them for public notification on the 24th of October for not less than 20 working days. And that's the statutory period. We have to leave it open. We can be longer than that. It can't be less than that. The background, the sequence of events leading up to today, a brief description of the contents of the documents is all set out in the agenda paper, and I'm not going to traverse that. I'm happy to answer questions on it, but I don't want to go over it. But I do, however, wish to make a couple of comments on both the code and the plan change. In terms of the Code of Practice, you may or may not have heard, but I know we have, around some comment out in the public sector around the content of the Code of Practice itself, especially regarding the outcomes that are sought through that code and how we're going to use it, but also about the text itself. While the content of the code is not open to change through this process, so that document is locked away, a review is probably warranted of the text of the code to smooth out what I'm going to call any integration issues between the code and what we haven't been able to achieve through the plan drafting, simply because it doesn't fit plan drafting. But the time for that review isn't now. It's after you've got the decisions or the recommendations of the hearing panel and you've made decisions on the plan change itself, because that will identify any rubbing points that we might need to look at. Council has completed all the necessary steps under the Resource Management Act to incorporate the Code of Practice into the district plan by reference, not by copy and paste, but just by referring to it. And formal adoption of the Code of Practice and Plan Change 2 are the last events in this sequence. So we're at that point today. That's really all I wanted to say about the code. And turning to the Plan Change 2, moving from a bylaw, the 2012 bylaw, to a Code of Practice and implementing it through this plan change represents something of a paradigm shift in the management of land use, subdivision and development within the district. While still enabling those activities, and the plan change is enabling, the standards required to be met are clearly established and enforceable. And I think both of those things are important. If you read the plan change, it'll be pretty clear what it is we're trying to achieve as a council. I'll talk about the royal we here through this process, but also the fact that because it's coming through the district plan, you can use the Resource Management Act to enforce compliance with those things. And that will have enormous benefits going forward for council as an asset manager, as well as the other network asset managers that operate within the district. However, where these standards are demonstrated not to be applicable, and there are instances where that will be the case, there's a clear pathway for bespoke solutions in the plan change. So we're not saying, this is it, take it or leave it. We're saying, this is it, comply with that, you've got an easy pathway. If you want to do something bespoke because of the particular circumstances of your property or your development, there's a pathway. And the expectations that you must meet for that bespoke solution are also set out. So it's not a black box that people are looking into. It will no longer be satisfactory, though, to postpone the design of new infrastructure assets to a future time. That must now be completed for consideration as part of any resource consent application. So it's not a case of, oh, give me a subdivision consent, I'll tell you how we're going to service it later. We'll comply with the code, don't worry about it. That's not going to cut the mustard any longer. We're going to have to see how that compliance is going to occur. And the reason we want to do that is sometimes when you start looking at the requirements for servicing development or subdivision or whatever, you start to change the subdivision itself because you find, oh, hang on, there's a better way of doing that. If we run the pipes this way and not that way, it's cheaper, it gives a better outcome. And so by not saying to them, oh, look, just give us your subdivision application and we'll deal with the rest later, we get the comprehensive picture. So there's a better result available for everybody, and that includes those who are paying for these developments. So it's designed as a plan change to promote a more comprehensive consideration in what I call a joined up way of all the implications of proposed subdivision, land development and land use, and hopefully lead to better outcomes for the project proponent, the asset managers, the public and the environment. In other words, the attainment of integrated, cost-effective and sustainable development throughout the district. So there's the big picture goal. And that's all I wanted to say. We're more than happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you. I don't think I can argue with any of those statements in that goal. I think that's actually a great goal and a great outcome, and that bespoke solution, the ability to do that, it ties in with our earlier presentation from Great South around that kind of the housing development that's needed, the tying everything in together and being easy to work with and enabling while still looking after our infrastructure and also not kicking the can down the road. So kind of seems to tick all the boxes to me, but are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Chamberlain? I'm still trying to get my head around the district plan, but can you define land use? What does that, if someone was going to do something, what triggers the district plan?
Our district plan has, so we normally think about activities usually in two different categories. Subdivision, which our plan covers, and that's fairly, I think I can explain that if needed, but we have a lot of activities that are use of the land. So for example, that might be a farming activity, that might be establishing a new dwelling, that might be some industrial activities. So when we think about land use, usually we're talking about the activities that are using that parcel or that area that's developing. And our district plan outlines specific activities that regulate differently depending on the type of use that occurs in that area. So our district plan already outlines that, and then the code of practice also has some definitions and some context for the different types of use and the different types of activities that might, or different types of infrastructure that might go with that use.
So if you wanted to convert, you say you plant trees or clearing or something,
Is this where this plan would kick in, or?
So the way that the new provisions are structured is that the applicant has to demonstrate if infrastructure is required for their activity. So do I need water supply? Do I need a wastewater supply? Is there some requirement for storm water, road access, and a few other things? So they have to demonstrate, am I doing something that requires access? So for example, let's just talk about a new farming activity. Let's just say you're putting in a new farm dwelling or staff dwelling. Well, naturally there would be some access and some parking or some elements that would be part of that new staff accommodation. And so we would expect as part of that application that the applicant would outline what they're doing for access and parking and some of these other things associated with that new staff accommodation. And it would be up to the way that we are structuring our new plan change is up for the applicant to demonstrate that they are meeting the requirements of the code and demonstrate that they're meeting the provisions, or to provide how they want to do a bespoke solution. And then at that point, if we assess that the application is complete, we'll go back and forth and determine if they met the standards.
So, and with the subdivision one, say you had a farming family that wanted to split the farm in half or something to give siblings or kids an opportunity to go farming. Is this plan, does it enable that to happen, or?
There's a lot of rules in the district plan associated with subdivision, and subdivisions usually have to go through a resource consent, and there's a lot of national policy statements like highly productive land that come into play. So this plan change does not interface with any of those national policy statements or those other provisions that might regulate subdivision. However, at the time of subdivision, we are looking at the applicant to demonstrate what type of systems that they're using. So for example, if they're going into a reticulated network, for example, if they're subdividing for residential activity, and they're not going into the reticulated networks for wastewater, we're asking them to demonstrate, well, how are you doing your on-site wastewater solutions? How is that done? That was already occurring in the district plan. We're now specifying that and making it more clear with this new plan change. So we are basically asking them to specify and make sure that they're meeting the standards of the code of practice so that there's an adequate solution. What we don't want is for lots to be developed or for a subdivision to occur where they've stated that they're going to do on-site wastewater disposal, and by the time it comes to actually put in the systems, it's not suitable. And we now put our infrastructure team or some of our other departments inside council in a very difficult position because the subdivision's been granted and now these systems no longer work. And now there's a kind of a crisis for how to manage these systems, or the wastewater is going onto an adjoining property, and now there's an issue of this property now being affected, and now there's a conflict. So we're looking at the way that Peter and I have designed these provisions, or council has designed these provisions, is to think about these systems holistically. So that at the time of subdivision, or at the time of land use, that the applicant is thinking about all the systems that are involved so that we get the appropriate lot size or we get the appropriate systems so that that development is sustainable for the future.
Councillor O'Brien.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, guys. In terms of talking about sort of streamlining the process from a development point of view, and from a contractor point of view, will this, through the tendering process, give a little bit more clarity around what the costs associated will be from contractors? So when a contractor comes in and puts in a tender to a particular development, based on what you've said before, will this allow them a little bit more stability around how they can do their budgets, regardless of with regard to our plan change, but also are there any risks associated with central government and their changes? Sorry, I had to throw that question.
I have something, but go ahead, Peter, and then I can talk.
You go.
So we heard
What sort of security, I guess, is what I'm saying, because you want to put your tender in, and it's going to cost $100 million, let's say, to do a development, and then from a district council perspective, in terms of the new plan change, it sounds like you've got some solidity there. But what are the risks associated from external sources in terms of coming in and saying, well, sorry, we've had a change of plan? Because we've seen that at a national level, right? So what are...
So we did pre-consultation with the development community that was involved in the development of the code of practice during that process. And then that we also broadened it to include some other members. And we heard two things. First is that the community does not know what's in, they didn't know what was in the bylaw, and they don't know what's in the code of practice. It's a fairly complicated, nuanced document that also refers to a lot of other standards that is set outside of it. So it's very difficult to understand. And what we heard from the community is that, sorry, I'm getting over being sick, is that they wanted more specifics and they wanted to know how to comply or what was involved with compliance with these standards. And what you will see in our plan change is that we have brought forward a lot of specifics that are really just explaining what's going on and trying to tease out the objectives or things that we're concerned about that this document is trying to explore and fix. And so, for example, with flooding or with water supply or with roading and transport, we're bringing it out and we're making that more specific. And we're doing that for two reasons. So one, applicants will now know when they look at the district plan and they look at compliance for subdivision or land use, they can see now more of the specifics, whereas previously in the district plan it says comply. Document and comply. And now we're teasing a lot of those details out. But in terms of national government changes, the district plan is a live, living document, and when those national changes come through, we're going to have to respond and adjust our district plan to accommodate those types of things. But going down this approach of being more specific and trying to tease out more of those details of some of these documents gives our applicants and our processors and even the people inside council assessing these applications more guidance. And we've tried to provide more guidance, more insight, so that people know what council's going to look at, so applicants know what they need to comply with, so that there's more of a knowledge base out there without having to go and explore this 200-plus page document.
I think that's one of the strengths of what you've done is that heavy engagement with the sector all the way through, so you've actually been an informed process from those that are going to be using the end result of what you're doing. So I think that's the actual key part of this process. It's been probably quite valuable.
I think the proof of that will be in the meeting later when we actually get this in front of them formally. If I can just add to that, and I don't want to extend that conversation too far, but one of the failings with the Resource Management Act in general, and we hear so much about why it's such a problem for development and that, but a lot of the problem occurs because those who are proposing projects don't actually think through any more than the immediate boundary of the project that they're interested in. And what we're trying to do with this is drive a slightly wider thinking. So if you're putting in a development and you want to connect into a local stormwater pipe or a local sewer connection, we're asking this question: is that pipe capable of accommodating all the discharge that you're going to create by putting all this hard surface over this area? And if it's not, either you've got to look at something else, or somehow we've got to find a way as the council of upgrading that. And that begs the question, is that on the council's asset management or asset growth plan, or is it not? So is that piece of land suitable for this development right now? All of those questions get answered. If they're answered positively, then the certainty that I think you're looking for post that stage becomes quite clear. The problem has been that councils generally tend to grant the consents, but then think later about what effect it might have on their assets, or you've got NZTA's assets, you've got network utilities and all sorts of things. And then the costs start to really balloon because the pressure's on those organisations as well. And there's a subdivision consent being granted. We're now looking to give effect to it, and they use that against everybody else. And the pressure goes on and the price goes up, and there's just so much uncertainty. This is about trying to get certainty back. But the certainty, quite frankly, sits in the hands of the project proponent and their advisors. It shouldn't sit with council. Council's done its job through the code of practice and through the plan change.
I think what you'll find too, and I use that $100 million example, but if you go back to the other end of the extreme and you talk about what Derek's with regards to use an example of, let's say it's a farm situation and they're going through succession planning, or with the way that farming is, to be brutally honest, and looking at the economic forecasts, farmers are having to become a little bit more creative in terms of how they diversify their income. and you look at things like significant natural areas or the highly productive land values and where they sit within the spatial plan, I think that you will find probably a gradual increase over time unless we have significant change in our primary sector and how we realise greater value overall and more of those applications coming through. So I think it's something that we need to be really wary of.
Don't disagree at all.
And also, the spatial planning piece that we do is going to be vitally important for this, for what you were just talking about, to kind of do that overarching, making sure that we can do the right development in the right place, tying into the future infrastructure demands of what's kind of happening as well. So it is going to tie in with that piece of work quite nicely. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Worship. I've been going on about this for a while, but just, I know it's talking about providing for climate change and increased water flows, etc., in terms of pipe gauges. And I read right through the whole climate change section of it and saw no reference to that whatsoever. And then in roading, same thing. And there is something in the wastewater about a minimum of 150 mil pipes, but that's all. I was told when I queried it earlier that it would be reviewed in a year, and that was a time to look at that. So is the review you're talking about in a year from now?
It would be the year for the implementation date. Continue, sorry if I cut you off.
Yeah, well, the only other thing was there was also an issue which was identified at the time of that hearing that we held about the type of pipes and their earthquake resilience, and there was another design that was better for that than the one that they went with. So those are two issues that I've had concerns about ever since.
So the development of we have to implement a year date of the Code of Practice. So we have to implement the 2023 version of the Code of Practice. And that process was done with ICC. And we know that there are some flaws or some inconsistencies with the Code of Practice that need to be improved. And there are already parts of the infrastructure team and others that are already looking at the improvements of the code. We are looking at the 1-year review from the date of implementation so that we get a full understanding of where our code is potentially failing or inconsistent or needs improvement, and where that can be done. I mean, we have not implemented it, so we don't know how well it's working or it's not working. In terms of climate change, we did get some engagement with Manawhanawa associated with incorporating climate change as part of the plan change. And we have actually included some parts associated with flood hazards in terms of exacerbating those systems. So there are some parts of the Code of Practice that talks about wastewater systems and stormwater systems and having them be affected by flood hazard and the risk of those systems failing due to the prevalence of those hazards. And we have incorporated matters of discretion and comments in terms of performance standards associated with the interpretation of the Code of Practice into the plan change. So part of that work has already been completed and we've already incorporated that material. And as part of our performance standards, we require them to meet that section 3 of the Code of Practice that talks about the climate change and those extreme weather events, AEP resiliency. And then we also, in terms of like section 6 and some of the other sections that mention performance standards associated with climate change and some of these flood hazards.
Okay, so it's a work in progress that.
I think that, if I can, that's probably the fairest way of putting it, because this started out to be a narrow plan change to allow the code to be implemented. And the further we got into it, the more we could have added to it to cover off a number of other issues, climate change being one of them. If we can get it nestled into the plan now, and with a plan review coming up, climate change is going to be front and centre of much of what happens within that plan review. That's the better place, I think, to deal with the implications of climate change for all sorts of things within the district, than trying to drive it through what is a relatively narrow plan change.
I just don't want to see it fall off the radar. That's all.
I don't think it will.
The one other point, and you mentioned engagement with Manawhanawa, on page 210, we're talking about road names, and I'm aware that through the Ngāi Tahu deed of settlement that there was actually reference to Maori road names being used, and I just don't see any reference to that at all in the couple of paragraphs where that's talked about. So I'm just wondering, did they have any comment on that when that was looked at? Were they aware of it? I wonder.
As part of the consultation with Manifesto, that was not an issue that was raised. And you're looking at you're raising comments about 5.3.13, traffic signs, road markings, and road furniture.
Yeah.
Again, as part of this plan change, we're looking at how to incorporate and manifest this document and interpret this document in terms of usage within the district. In terms of actually reviewing the code of practice, the team's decision was to table that because we needed to take a version to then take to the plan change. And opening up the code of practice for a full review, again, at this time, we felt like was outside of the scope of the project.
I noticed it's suggested about developers being asked to put forward names, which is fine. But I just think they need a bit of a steer to consider Maori names, as it were.
It obviously was something that Mana Whenua were interested in, but it didn't come to the surface during the consultation of the plan change itself.
I pointed out the other day, but there's a spelling mistake on page 522 with dairy.
That must be the one we left.
Got to leave a spelling mistake.
No, it was to one of the staff. It probably got through to you now.
So we've got our recommendations here, and acknowledging and recognising the fact that this is the end of quite a lengthy process. That your earlier comments about the big stack of paper is only representing a hang of a lot of work. I kind of sense your excitement about getting this signed off, and so we're the recommendation that we adopt the Code of Practice for Subdivision Land Use and Development 23. We adopt the proposed plan change 2 to the Southland District Plan and the evaluation report prepared pursuant to Section 32 of the Resource Management Act 1991. That we approve the proposed plan change 2 to the Southland District Plan and the evaluation report prepared pursuant to Section 32 of the Resource Management Act 1991. For public notification on the 24th of November for a period of no less than 20 working days. You're like a lawyer reading all this out. Notes that the Group Manager, Strategy and Partnerships and Strategic Planning and Policy Manager have delegated authority to amend the proposed plan change in accordance with clauses 16.1 and 16.2 of the first schedule to the Resource Management Act 1991 to make alterations of minor effect or correct minor errors. Someone in a position to move those around the table? We have for Duffy, seconded by Councillor Menzies. Is there any further discussion on that? Looks like there is none, so I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anybody against? That is carried, and thank you for your work and your team as well. And on that note, I will declare the council meeting closed, and I will take my leave from this, and I'll go and balance out that side of the room.
Oh, okay, rightio. Yes, thank you for that. Yes, we'll get there. So essentially, we are starting the meeting for all intents and purposes. So welcome here. Thank you. I did appreciate getting the chance for the workshop this morning. It is to me important. So I'm glad that we did that and we spent the time. Can I get us to the apologies? I think Matt's obviously had to shoot through for the afternoon. He won't be here for the meeting, I take it, Christine.
Right, meeting.
Are there any other apologies? There being none, I'll move from the chair that we sustain Matt's apology. Thank you, Christine, for seconding. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yes, it's carried. No leaves of absence. Take it. Are there any matters of interest that you need to raise coming up? Surprised if there was. You should be always careful how you say those things. No problems. No extraordinary or urgent items. We know there's the workshop after it. Confirmation of minutes 4th of September. I'll move from the chair that they're taken as good and correct. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Tom. Any matters of accuracy or correctness in those? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Haven't been asked for any public participation. Rachel informed me that yesterday that there was no coming. So it gets us up to the work plan, please. Anne, is it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. No Teresa today.
No, unfortunately, actually, it's going to be reasonably quiet. It's Joe and I that are going to hold the fort for accounting.
Oh, okay.
Derek and Teresa are both not well today, so I think we've probably got the better end of the stick.
Okay, right. What, having you?
No, and the fact that we're not ill.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I hope they get well. In your hands, Anne.
Thanks. So in just terms of the work plan itself, we're pretty much on track with what we've talked about there. We've moved the timetable for the annual plan over into this meeting, which you'll see there. The financial monthly report has also been included in this agenda, along with the internal audit terms of reference. The procurement policy, we're just doing some more discussions on that, so that potentially would move out to December, or it may be a little bit later. We're just still working through that. The self-assessment, we were just going to transfer that to a workshop. I had planned to do that today, but of course with other things that had come up, we'll just move that one again. And so otherwise, that's, yeah, we're pretty much on track.
Just remind me, the two little ones that have appeared down the bottom, council organisations is on page 27, council, which come up for the next meeting. Council organisational reporting and delivery of the project work programme.
So the council organisation reporting was the one that Matt Wilson noted to us last time, that to comply with the Government Act, we just needed to do some reporting on some of our council organisations, which was not found.
Council organisations. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. So, okay, gotcha. Yep,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Yep.
And the delivery of the project work plan, that's just an update coming in. Fran just talking about the project work plan and where things are at, and so that's coming in there when she's back.
Keeps us busy. The annual report obviously is here, but carries on over for finality at the 4th of December. 4th of December, guys, 21 days. Okay. Any questions, comments, points? None? Sorry, motion. I will. I'll put. Can I move the motion, please? I'm happy to move that we receive and we note the amendments. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, John. I'll take that. I heard your laughter too, which is great. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Great. Right, let's move to a couple of very interesting proposed internal audits. And I'll let you, I presume, introduce it. Melissa, great to have you here as well. And we'll ask you to speak once Ian's at the topic, please.
Yep, so it's my pleasure just to introduce two scopes for internal audits. It's been a wee while since we've done these, but we're trying to just action them through so that we can start to do some of the work. In terms of these two audits, they would be the 6th and 7th audit that we will have completed, and this formal piece of work with Deloitte. As we noted to you previously, we actually do need to go to the OAG in regards to these audits now, because of course we've got our external auditor, Walton, who's also from Deloitte. OAG's got some clear guidelines on what we can or what they can or can't do, and it has to meet within the definition of assurance. As we said to you previously, when we got permission to go for these two, they're very comfortable with that these two audits fit within that. We are just still waiting to hear back from Mike all ago though, but we believe that these will fit within it. So the two we're presenting today are the scope for the Stewart Island Rakiura visitor levy. So that audit has been mentioned off and on. Of course, it sits within our contractual arrangements with the three entities in regards to the collecting of the levies for council, that we would undertake those audits. It's also been mentioned as part of the review by council that we needed to undertake something, so that's why that one's in there. The review for the request of service was part of the 17A review. There were some notes in there just about maybe us looking at the request for service and making sure that there was a clear line moving through, and that perhaps people who are phoning in weren't over getting responses faster than those who were perhaps tracking it as a request for service. So we're just taking the opportunity to look at that, see if there's any opportunities. In terms of the actual audit for the request for service, in talking with Deloitte, they've just respectfully asked possibly for another $9,000 to be allowed for. This is only due to the fact that we've got multiple systems that are tracking our request for service. In terms of water and wastewater, they're going through Infor, whereas all of our other queries are going through request for service. So they don't know if they'll need that. They just wanted us to put that in now, or actually I wanted to put it in now so that we could move forward without compromising it. And it's over to you whether you wish to look at that scope and reduce it, or whether you're quite happy for us to keep moving forward in terms of it. After we've done these two, of course, then we'll be left with 3 internal audits: information integrity, asset management, and the current document management system. I guess I'll probably hand it over to the chair if he wants to go down the.
Yeah, look, Melissa, welcome to the meeting. Is there anything, I have a couple of questions for you, but is there any sort of key points you want to make about the two proposed audits before I open up to the committee, please?
No, I don't think so. I think we can take the scope and approach as being read, and they're quite straightforward there. So just happy to address any questions you have specifically.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Comments or questions, please, team? I think these are two very well warranted ones. Actually, prior to your Section 70A review, which I never read, I had said we should be doing the request for service system. I think it's something that's very important for us as governors, because actually you want to have a reliable system and the ratepayers come and say, hey, we've got a problem. Often it's sheet them or turn them, or turn the wrong word, point them to the request for service. So I don't know that it's actually working right, and I think it's time that we did have a look at the levy collection. You may have a view on that later on, Julie. Can I just ask a question then really about the review service? And in essence, it's looking for, I guess, a level of efficiency. I was wondering about the extent to which we conclude on the effectiveness of the system. And I guess that does come out in the reviewing, third bullet point, reviewing completeness and accuracy. And then you've got, and responded to in a timely manner. I would almost drive my desire actually from that point rather than necessarily the rest, because if it's effective, I guess the rest follow, but it's not a big drama. Melissa, I guess I was wanting to get a sense that actually we could look at the process, we could see activity, we could see it closed, but actually for the ratepayer, has it been closed well? In other words, has the service been delivered? Are you able to probably comment on whether you are going to touch on that in terms of the proposed internal audit?
Yeah, from our perspective, in terms of the approach there, we would look to see responses to ratepayers with the queries raised, and make sure that there's a bit of a feedback loop to make sure that all the matters have been addressed with respect to the queries that have been raised in a timely and a satisfactory manner. So there would be some sample testing around that specifically.
Great. Look, I think that would be good, and there's no way I'm wanting to target, but one must also look a wee bit about when you look at bottlenecks, where are the bottlenecks in the organisation?
Yeah.
And I say that from a how do we improve perspective, not from any other basis, which will interest me. So look, I appreciate that. Can I ask the other question? Have we done a visitor levy review before? Is this the first one? Julie, you're happy to do it, by the way? I always think of you as the queen of spend on this one. You give away the money. John, any comment from you on this?
Well, the island's been asking for it for some years.
Yeah, okay.
Just to check the...
Yeah. Because I think those
making the correct declarations and...
So, having someone look at the process and see, highlight any issues that there are, will help the operators surely to streamline their and make it as seamless as possible for them too, because it is a good service.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for that, Julie. I agree. Oh, sorry, Christine.
Just a comment about how the operators will be advised ahead of time that this is going to happen, so they're not surprised. And secondly...
Oh, sorry, can I just check? Sorry, have the operators been made aware? I suppose they haven't, because we haven't approved this yet.
Not yet, but yeah, we're going to, as 31, as part of our next steps, we're going to advise them.
Okay,
so,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christine.
Secondly, just with regard to the RFS system review and perhaps the need for additional funding, kind of reflects hopefully the second part of the second point on that scope, assessing the operational efficiency of the RFS system. It will include just looking at there's more than one entry point for the RFS and whether that's working for the ratepayer in respect of making.
That would be the intention, yes.
Yes, Paul.
So the RFS review, does that involve some surveying of users or? Sorry.
There would be samples of the requests for service that have actually been raised, and we would obviously agree those samples based on populations and methodology that we have in place.
Right. Melissa, what's been asked is whether we would contact the people who had put the request in for service and whether they were satisfactory with the response.
Yeah. The only, I think the request for service is brilliant. The only thing I would comment on is that I suppose I do put in a number of them, and you get a wee thing saying,
well, I see your name, shall we?
your ticket has been closed, and you actually haven't a clue what that relates to. If you put in 2 or 3, you've got no idea what that means. And I'd say a lot of ratepayers, I understand
in the same boat, yeah.
Things that come from council you don't understand anyway, but ratepayers probably don't. So, yeah, that's the only comment I'd make. But certainly the results are great.
I would tend to think, Melissa, you didn't have any plans though to ring ratepayers directly, so it's probably an out of scope that we didn't have. But is it something council wants to be undertaken?
Yeah, we've found cases where we put a request for service in, it gets acknowledged by the contractor. 2 weeks later, you're actually putting the same request for service back in, and it sometimes takes multiple times before there's actually action.
Okay, well, I guess
But that could, hopefully that'll come up in the...
But that's fine. I think this all goes back to, Melissa, if I could use my words, this idea of how effective is the system. Yeah. And if as a ratepayer you're left uncertain or you're putting multiple requests for the same issue, there's an effectiveness issue floating around here. So I wonder, for the purposes of this, if we could leave that with you, Melissa and Anne, just to realise that we are looking at the results of what's delivered as well, not just the efficiency of the system to pick up and report on and yada yada yada. Okay, brilliant. Well, I think we're saying worth it. Paul, Christine, I think you might have said whoever did that actually we need to recognise there's also an added price to this, but I think it's warranted. Are there any other? Sorry, you spoke.
Rob, just a slightly cheeky comment, but look, they're respectfully asking for the increase in 9K, which I support given the nature of the work, but I'm going to respectfully ask that they try and not fulfill the 9K increase.
Good point. It's a contingency. Okay, let's if you feel the scope's got to go, please, there'll be conversation between the two. And Anne as to.
Yeah, with respect to Deloitte, I actually checked with them. They didn't actually come to me in regards to it. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be given the due diligence, and particularly with the 2 services come in. So that David was very clear that he was not looking to extend the 9. But given this extra piece of work, we possibly will do.
Not a cheeky comment at all, Rob. It's a good one. Okay. In that case, let's just go to the resolutions, please, which is we do this all in accordance with the Act, I think we do. So we approve the internal audits, terms of reference, and we recommend Council approve up to an additional $9,000 plus is the complete the audit. And there's that comment. So, and keep your BDI, your accountant's BDI on that would be great. I'll move and second for this. Thank you, Rob. Second, thank you, Julie. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Yeah, Melissa, thank you. Appreciate that. And you can see that I think the council will be very interested in both these when they come through. So that's wonderful. And I do appreciate your guys' time spending here this afternoon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
I guess just one process there is just to check that actually the Auditor General does accept this, but I think we're saying it sounds like they will, which is good. Right, the annual dog control. This is a brilliant report. Oh, yeah, short, Adrian, which is impressive. I'm not certain I've received one before either. So you've got deep scrutiny from me.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to give you something so exciting to look at after lunch. There's a requirement under Dog Control Act Section 10A that we report statistics relating to our dog control activities during the previous year. This year is very, very similar to the previous year. The only area where there is a reasonably significant change is that we've issued more infringement notices to people. This relates to us being more targeted on people who are historically and continually breaking the rules. And so we are focusing on the bad dog owners and saying, you're not getting more chances. And one thing I think I've said to council before, by the time we issue an infringement notice for registration, they've been contacted by us at least 5 times. And that's not reasonable conduct on their part if they don't want to pay it. So other than that, the report is fairly standard. We had 1 dog attack last year where a person was injured, which means we failed our KPI. But more recently, up to date at the moment, we've got dogs biting everybody for fun, it seems. We don't know why. We're trying to work that out. But it's mainly within households, but that's not part of that report. So that report purely gives them the statistics. They then chuck it in with the other 68 councils, and they come out with a national statistical report. They also include information from ACC on dog bites reported at hospitals and that sort of thing. So it's a hurdle we have to jump. It's not particularly useful either as a tool for guiding us on where we're performing, because we do that anyway through our normal procedures, but it's just something that we need to use for the government DIA.
Yes, I worked in Wellington when the Dog Control Act was going through, and it just turned Department of Internal Affairs people up, and they couldn't believe they'd spent so much time with dogs.
They're an incredibly emotive subject. I mean, I've got people at the moment who are hiding dogs everywhere and stuff, you know.
I mean, look, I take your point. You talk about it. You report on issues elsewhere, but is there any sort of, looking at these numbers and comparing, I thought, well, actually, is there any sort of overall assessment I could draw?
No, I mean, as I report anyway on dogs, our actual registration numbers at the end of last year were incredibly good. I think we're at 99.997%. I think there's 1 dog we can account for. And what we don't do is lie. So it's easy to write dogs off and say, well, we just don't know where they are, we'll just write them off. We don't do that. So we will try to find these dogs. Obviously, dogs die, dogs move out of the area, dogs change ownership, and normally we can identify them. I mean, what's important to me is the negative effects from dogs. And so we try to concentrate on that. And one thing I'm really hot on is giving good dog owners opportunity to actually have fun out of having their dogs, whilst dealing with the ones who have the gnarly dogs that bite people and bite other animals. So I'm quite happy with our dog performance, our dog control performance. We've actually just recruited into a vacancy on that side, and a very experienced animal control officer who's just adding to the team. So no, I think it will only get better. There's nothing in there that raises alarm with me. There's nothing in there that makes me feel that we're doing it wrong. But we will maintain our focus on the miscreant element of the dog ownership population.
So look, I just take it from your comments about the 150 infringement notices. It's not that people infringing are going up.
No,
it's just we're saying time's up.
We're being more targeted, and we're not allowing people as much leeway as we used to get in the past.
That's great. Well, thank you. I've had a lot of questions here. I just said I enjoyed the report. Good to see you, actually, believe it or not, from an assurance perspective. Questions for anybody else? Must be dog owners in the room with questions. Massive questions here for Adrian, surely.
I think Adrian's answer, because I was looking for the analysis to go with the report, but you've reported on that now. So.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? No?
I mean, out of interest, Mr. Chair, the dog bylaw is being reviewed early next year, and they've done some pre-analysis.
Yeah.
And feedback is that people want to have dog parks in some areas, which is unsurprising. There was also a lot of nice comments about the dog control officers, so that was really cool as well. So we're rolling up to that. Dog control bylaws are the 3rd worst bylaw to review, because there's a lot of emotion involved, but I think we should get through this one fairly positively, because the existing bylaw is pretty good. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Margie.
Can I just ask one question? And it's probably, if a dog dies, when you register your dog, if a dog dies, do they have to let council know straight away?
Well, it's in their interest to do that, because they get a refund. of an outline licence. It is actually an offence to not tell council, but it's not something that we rigidly enforce. But yeah, they're supposed to let us know, but it's not something that we get too excited about, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Possibly a curiosity thing. So the dogs that are menacing by breed characteristic and by schedule for breed, so are they not one and the same, or is there a difference there?
No, there's dogs which are automatically, they're like Argentina Facilio and Brazilian and purebred pit bull. So as soon as they are that breed, they're dangerous. Menacing. Other dogs which may be then assessed as being of that breed are also considered menacing as well. And it's got to the level now where it involves DNA tests and everything else. Yeah, and sometimes a dog looks like a pit bull, but genetically it's a Labrador. So it's not the easiest thing on earth. It does happen. But as I was saying to my team last week, we had a Chihuahua kill a Rottweiler in Golden Bay.
Really?
Stuck in its throat and choked it to death. But that's not actually true. I've just made that up. But I did classify Chihuahua as dangerous for biting a child on the face. But there you go.
Was the Chihuahua's name David? And Pitbull's name?
It could have been. It could have been. Yeah.
So are they quietly dying out, or are we getting new ones turning up?
Well, they're not allowed to bring them into the country. They're not allowed to breed them, but they still keep appearing. So I don't know how. To be honest with you, some of these dogs are just perfectly nice dogs. They just happen to be the wrong breed. But that's the way the world is, I suppose. Yeah, they should be getting less logically, but I'm not sure they are.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other final comments, questions? Being none, do I have somebody prepared to move that we receive Adrian's great report? Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Rob. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Thank you, Copper. That's great. Appreciate that. Righto, financial report for the period 31 August. 2 months. Joe, welcome.
So I've just introduced Jo Hooper. Jo's come to council, about 3 months ago, haven't you, Jo? So she's looking after her. She's our project accountant, so she's been looking after for Joni for monthly accounting and associated that while Joni's had a wee baby, Samuel.
And for information, Samuel is absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you for being here, Joe. And I don't know if I have met you before, but it's lovely to have you on board. So we look forward to the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, this report is relatively similar to all prior periods, but we have added an additional section on Treasury for your information with all the investment and borrowings that we've been doing. But generally, overall, the key points are for income. NZTA Waka Kotahi income is under budget, predominantly because of phasing, which is going to be matched to the work plan. Under community resources, our better off funding grants have not yet been received, and the environmental services, although the building numbers are consistent, the building consent numbers are consistent, the value of all the consents are a lot lower. And that's consistent for the rest of the country as well. For the OPEX side, the EMS quarterly invoice has not yet been issued, and that's about 115k, so that's under. CSA fuel costs are coming in a lot lower than budgeted, and the seasonality of a lot of maintenance projects all start later in the year. So from the phasing hasn't been put in, so at the moment it's spread 1/12 across the year, but this it looks like we're well under. That phasing is currently being completed and should majority be in for the next report. As mentioned, from a CapEx point of view, we haven't done any major reporting on it for the same reasons. The seasonality hasn't started and we haven't done the phasing, so the data is not very comparable for August. The new section Treasury, as I said, it's a new section that we've added to show the position at the month end.
Just it's Christine, I think, has got a question that's related to the correct.
Just a quick question. So for the CapEx, that is going to be phased as well, and we'll see that in the next.
Yes, in the next report. Yep.
We'll get a report from Fran at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Which is an important one because we're halfway through the year, nearly 5 months, and it will be committed. Sorry, we haven't planned on the market. We won't do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Christine.
Yep. So from a Treasury point of view, we are still refining this. It's the first time we've put it into the report. We're going to be adding other information such as the covenants requirements for the LGFA. We're also working with PwC, who are the investment advisors, to make sure all our obligations are met. There are a couple that haven't met yet, but the next drawdown and borrowings occur in the second half of the year, so that's when we're endeavouring to meet those. So does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Yes, do we have any? Yes, Derek.
I'm not sure whether I haven't been doing my job, but I think when I first joined the organisation, this place had a debt of something like 21 million, and now I'm seeing here, it's nearly at 76 million, but it seems to have jumped up. I don't know whether I've missed it or not, but I know there's borrowings to go into the investment funds and stuff like that. Have I missed something or?
So through Mr. Chair, that's the internal loans. So the actual borrowings themselves externally is the line below that.
Yeah, that's external borrowings of.
Oh, the 75?
75
yes.
million.
Of course, yeah, that is principally due to the investment stuff. So we've borrowed now 20 million to invest.
That's what I mean. I think when we first started, I come on council, we had a debt of around about 20 odd million. So I know we had an operating deficit of 6.8 million. So I presume that was borrowed money. It just seems to be still a bit of a gap.
Yeah, it's going to keep growing because we're going to put another 20 million in this year. That's for the investment alone, and then we've got our capital projects, which are majority borrowed as well. So we're actually lower at the end of our year than we would expect it to be. We'd expect it to be around 90 million.
So it does reflect, Derek, a critical part. Yes, that are increasing. If you take a net, so let's say our investments are increasing because we're having to invest in our assets. And how much this year will go for the investment in assets?
Oh gosh, I would
Roughly,
have to have a look.
no, it doesn't matter. Not a problem. Okay, but that is the reason debts are climbing, is primarily because of the need to invest in assets.
So all our capital expenditure is basically borrowed money.
Not all of it. The roading isn't. But when you're talking about a lot of the community stuff, it is. Water, it is. Sewerage, it is.
Which is a dominant debt feature for most councils. There's 3 water or 2 water. Thank you, Derek. Any other questions? Yes, Don.
Thank you. Well, I've got similar concerns to Derek. The internal borrowings, last term, they were about 40 million.
I think they were a wee bit higher than that. I think they were 53 from memory. I don't really know on memory, but they were about 53.
So the current debt position of this organisation, liabilities, total liabilities, 154 million.
Well, this is lower than what we've ever budgeted. So these numbers it's not new, and the fact that we have been reflecting these in our annual plans and our long-term plans, and they are actually, as I said before, they are actually less than where we had expected to be. There's nothing unusual that's happened because projects cost more and we're incurring more debt. It's purely in line with what we've been talking about.
Well, sorry, through the chair, I mean, I think a lot of people have an expectation that our borrowing shouldn't be at this level. I'm not saying they're lower than where they should be or could be, but really there is a theory that this organisation is heavily in debt already. Personally, I think we've got a leadership issue, and that this organisation is taking on water. It's like a boat taking on water. You can only do that for so long. Things do need to change, because we've done that long-term plan, $300 million of debt. You can see the way we're tracking, we'll do that easily. And to blame 3 waters, I think it's not particularly accurate, because this organisation spends a lot of other money, but it's not 3 waters. So we've got an issue that, it would be better for the community if we addressed it now, rather than waiting until we're heavily in debt. Well, got twice as much debt as we've already got.
I think, you say a theory, and I take your point on board. We're talking about an annual plan discussion. We're not talking about the results, okay? That's something to take forward. This is good use of financial information. What does it mean about the position we're at, what position we're in? That's an annual plan discussion that you're raising.
We're about to have that discussion now.
Yes, that's right. And as Anna's pointed out, you also had that discussion through your LTP, and you're in a position effectively where you anticipated your LTP. So they are key financial policy decisions, but not one that Jo is directly accountable for. She's only implementing, so that's what we've got here. Any other questions? Chief Jo, I was interested to know why we had such a negative cash flow. Is that our rating cycle? If I got net cash flows and operations, we had -9 million, which was a worrying number. I presume that relates to what, first instalment in, but we haven't yet got the second instalment.
First instalment, remember, was delayed because of the LTP. Because
Yeah.
instead of coming in at the end of August, it's coming in at the end of September.
That's right. So that'll prove itself next. Gotcha. I was thank you for the compliance with the investment and liability management policy. It was actually me that asked that last time, so I'm deeply appreciative that we're starting to get that. And if you're still working with Brent on some of the conversion, that's fine. Super cool. And look, the key indicators are the ones that we should be looking at. I look particularly at the debt maturity profile. And it's interesting, isn't it, to know when debt matures, at what rate we're going to have to renew it. Conventionally, we're reasonably balanced over the life of our LTP, which suggests that we aren't going to be subject to too much risk of spikes or particular points in it. That's cool. I did obviously look at the amber. Well done for amber and not a different colour. Noting that actually, in terms of our interest rate exposure, we are out of policy. I'll be up front. That's by definition, by the way. We're out of policy in those middle 3 years. Now, just explain to me. You said that when you go to market, the next tranche you're going to correct this.
We're going to investigate the best way to make sure we stay within policy. The way this is sort of built is designed on what the interest rates are going to be when our current debt matures. And at the moment we don't have any interest rates set, which is why we are under compared to what the LTP is expecting. So when we do the next debt drawdown, we'll consider what those rates are going to be, the life of the loans, to see what the best outcome will be, and whether or not potentially what we've got is slightly too complex for our needs, or how we're going to bring that into account.
Look, we are out of policy, if I can be blunt, and I know there's a couple of motions in front of me here to actually deal with that. So it is, I'm just calling what it is, I suppose. I'm not overly troubled by this at the moment on the basis that we are trying to assess where the market is going. So that's fair enough. But our ban for having fixed or a fixed interest position are there for good reason. So unless we need to change it, I will be looking to see that we get it right, which is, I feel like I'm being a school teacher here. But I mean, it's the benefit of our prudential limits. We want to make certain that we have a level of certainty around our interest rates. So I'll be intrigued, Dan, to see where that gets us to the next report. And I was interested in CapEx. Thank you, Christine, but we'll get the CapEx report next time round. And I think the key thing I know to do is the phasing issue that you'll face the next report as well, which gives us a better sense of comparing apples with that. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Tom?
Sorry, Joe, I might have missed it. I'm just looking at resolution B. Could you explain that?
So the resolution B is what the chair was mentioning to in regard to page 58, where we've got some amber, where we are currently out of policy.
Sorry. My mind might be somewhere else.
No, that's all good. So yeah, in year 4, 5 and 4, 5 and 6, we're currently breaching policy, and that's what we are going to take into account when we do the next drawdown in the second half of the calendar year, along with working with PwC to make sure.
I think we hope at our next meeting we want to get Brent here, is that right? And I mean, this might be useful, Don, to have a chat about, because I mean, our debt instruments are a mixture of fixed and floating, and we have determined that for a level of certainty that we should meet bands, which is probably would be a minimum level of fixed positions taken around our interests going out over the life of our debt, and some can be on floating. It's just I guess credible financial planning on the basis of interest rates would move. What it does mean is that in those middle years, we say we want a band of having interest rate fixed between, if you take year 4, between 30 and 80%. So up to 80% of our debt could have a fixed interest rate to it, whether it's the nature of the instrument or whether because we have swapped. In this situation, what the minimum is 30 and we're so we are more exposed to interest rate movements in our policy said that we want to be in. So it is a matter of actually trying to get this corrected. And you've got the strategy here as to how and when you do that. At this stage, with interest rates going down, it's not such a problem for us, but it's one that we'd want to get remedied, I would have thought. Any question? Any other questions? So the motion is that we receive the report, and Don, thank you for referring to the inconsistent decision, which in other words, we are recognising we're outside it, and management indicated that the position will be reworked. In other words, brought within thresholds. We're not changing our thresholds, but you'll bring the position inside the thresholds we've set, and that you're reckoning council consider this issue and change this through when the investment liability policy is next read. Just want to understand that actually. Sorry, I got B. What's C after?
So it's more that the last time the policy was put together was in 2021. What we need to consider is whether with further investment and borrowings that we are doing, is it actually still relevant to what we need?
Okay.
And easier for everyone to understand.
Okay, great. Okay, so effectively, we need to review our investment liability policy. That, along with these prudential ones, will be considered. Just remind me, when will that be?
The review?
Yeah.
We plan to do it hopefully in the next 18 months, within the next 18 months.
Okay. So at this stage, B is really important because those are the policy settings for us in the next 18 months. We need to make certain that we get ourselves back in line. Okay, cool. I'll move that. I'm happy to do that. So do I have a second, please? Thank you, Darren. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Are you appearing again?
Yes.
Don't go away then. Well, Rob and I got nervous out in the Mahitahi room before the meeting started, knowing that we had to do the annual report. It's the majority of our agenda this afternoon, although there's some key things. So, Rob, and I suspect I can head straight over to you
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here along with the finance team to present the draft unaudited annual report for the 23-24 year to the committee, and we're asking the committee to provide us some feedback today on the annual report, on the draft annual report, and to endorse the release of the draft annual report to our auditors, Deloitte, the auditing process. So I'm sure it's a report you've been waiting on all day. So we will take the report as being read and also take the committee through some aspects that we would like to highlight. So the report as it went onto the agenda on Friday is still in its draft form. You'll see that there's yellow highlighting in all 3 sections, indicating staff are still finalising either the commentary or the numbers within those sections. Should there be any significant changes to what went onto the agenda, we will speak to that either today or at a later finance and assurance meeting this year. Overall, the draft annual report shows an operating deficit of 6.8 million compared to the annual plan of 9.2, and Anne will take us through the financial aspects shortly. As the committee is aware, the council needs to prepare reports on its annual performance, completing the report within 4 months of the end of the financial year. Due to the late adoption of LTP 34, we are preparing this annual report later in the year than we normally would, with the proposed adoption date being around the 11th of December, or at the 11th of December council meeting. A copy of the full draft annual report is included in the committee's agenda today, and it's been prepared in 3 sections. Section 1 is the executive summary that starts on page 75 of your agenda. Section 2, the council activities, starting on page 123 of your agenda, and Section 3, the financial information, 199 of your agenda. The audit process will run from the 14th of October until the 15th of November. Following that, the draft report, including the audit opinion, will be expected for the 22nd of November committee meeting. Any changes either from the auditors or staff will be tracked, and if significant changes are made, they'll be provided to the committee for confirmation. A summary report is also being prepared, but it's not required to be audited. So the status of the report is of today. So there's still to write our Mayor and Chief Executive statement at the beginning of the report. There's still a small number of activity statement commentaries to be finalised. The final formatting of the report is to be completed. The design version of the document is yet to be started, and a summary document is yet to be started. There's also some aspects of the financial information to be completed. There are a couple of things we're looking at to change within the draft report, such as moving the commentary on local waters done well from Section 2, where it is with the activities, up into Section 1, the executive summary. Making some changes to the table of the yet to be started projects, perhaps summarising them instead of having them in a table, and adding to the key highlights section in the executive summary some more of our completed projects. Currently they're all reported in the activity section of the report, so moving some of them to the exec summary will put a bit more of a focus on some of the work that's been completed. So the non-financial results, organisational performance result, as noted in your report, the committee received the year-end performance report at the 4th of September meeting. That was the report on our KPIs. The committee noted the performance of the activities and noted the context provided for the outcome. As a reminder of the KPI results, of Council's 58 KPIs, there were 4 that were not measured, 2 of those being biennial and 2 being as a result of the flood events in September and April, however, and some staffing at Environment Southland. However, since that report, KPI 10.2, which is the survey, the household survey has gone out, and results will be reported to the committee as soon as they're available. There were 14 KPIs that were not achieved. Those were discussed at that 4th of September meeting, and they're also reported in this annual report. And there were 40 or 69% of KPIs that were achieved, including 17 DIA required KPIs and 1 statutory requirement KPI. And all of that information is in Section 2 of your annual report, starting at page 123 of your agenda. The other non-financial reporting is on our projects that were planned for the 2023-24 year. In your report, you can see there was 3% of projects that were terminated. There were 39% still in progress, 42% completed. There was also 16% not started as of the 30th of June 2024, and they're outlined on page 94 of your agenda. Since that June date, 3 more of those projects have been completed. And as I mentioned before, we were going to rework that table into more of a summary. I'd like to thank councillors who have already been in touch with some minor corrections for the report. And I'll now hand over to Anne to take us through financial results. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Robin. So if I just now just take you through the financial results, I'll take the report pretty much as read. And what I want to do is just highlight some of the key headings that are in here and just have a bit of a commentary around them. In terms of our statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure, you can see there that our deficit was lower than expected. So we had budgeted 9.2, it ended up to be 6.8. A lot of the variations that we're talking about in here shouldn't be no surprise to you. They'll have already been talked about as our monthly financial report. But if I just quickly emphasise the things that have occurred since that monthly financial report, in terms of our income, the income is higher than what we budgeted due to 3 key items. One of them was WasteNet. So we don't actually budget as part of our annual plan or our LGP waste net activities. So there was a $2 million increase in waste net there, but equally there was a $1.9 million expense also on the other side of it. Vested assets was $1 million higher, or $1 million was put in as part of the end of the year entries that we didn't have. Now, just to talk about vested assets as a separate comment, that should have been 3.8 this year, but we've found an error in last year's accounts of 2.8 million, so it's a net effect this year. So last year what happened was we recorded Luxmore land as being actually new to our books. Of course, Luxmore land wasn't. That was just an error, just an interpretation or an Excel spreadsheet that came through from one of the teams in council through to finance, and when we went in analysing it just picked it up an error. So we put an extra $2.8 million in there that we shouldn't have. So that's why the vested income is only 1 million instead of the 3.8. We also have a forestry revaluation in there, so that's a deficit that came through this year. So our forestry revaluation decreased, and that shows through our income. So that's the key changes in our income side. In terms of our expenditure side, on top of all the things that we were talking about as part of our monthly accounts, depreciation ended up being $2.7 million higher due to the revaluations. Which you'll see in there, the revaluations this year are not as bad as what we've had in the past. So our roading revaluation went up 5.2% and our three waters went up 3%. So a lot more in line with probably the past than what we've seen, particularly like in last year. So, but as a result of that, of course, our depreciation is based on the LTP numbers. So we already had a number of years of inflationary gains plus the changes for this year. So that's why depreciation is so much higher. And that's had an impact on our benchmarks as well. In terms of waste net, I talked about, and also the landfill contingency, that was a decrease simply because of Blue Cliffs being brought forward. Then that was removed out of our books. So that's that, along with all of the items on there. What I might do is just stop and ask, has anyone got any questions in terms of the income and expenditure in there that you'd like me to cover on?
I laugh when you say that an increase in wealth is put a negative light. The revaluation is not so bad. Who feels assets are an asset or a liability? I think it's what you're really reflecting here, isn't it? That actually increase in depreciation is a challenge for councils. So,
effectively, yes, from a funding point of view.
Yeah, from a funding point of view.
It's a funding point of view.
Pain in the arse, isn't it? Would you use that phrase? That's what you do down the road. Anyway, probably should be down the road. Okay. Any other comments from Ian? Thank you for that.
Okay, so I'll just move on to the financial position then. In terms of financial position, no real difference than any other year. Of course, our property, plant and equipment outweighs our asset side. So every time we do a revaluation, that's what impacts mostly on our total assets. Of course, we do have to note in there that we didn't do our full investing of our reserves that we'd planned to do during the year. So that has had a small impact in there as well. And our total liabilities, our debt is lower due to the combination of two factors, one being the fact that we haven't done that investing, and the two being that our capital program, we didn't deliver it quite to the extent that we had intended to. So those were the two factors in there. If I go down then, just talking about reserves, our reserves are on par pretty much with where they were. So we're looking at a closing balance of 43.7 compared to 42.7 the year before. Principally that is in the district operating reserve. So we've got an extra $1 million in that district op reserve. And if you remember, that district op reserve is basically the balancing out fund from the district rates. So wherever we've got savings in particular areas, then that's where it goes to if it's related to the district. Now, there is commitments though, because you'll remember we do that carry forward report. So when we carry forward some of our costs, there's about, I think from memory, it's about 550,000 of that extra money in there that's actually going to be used for this year's activities because you've carried those costs forward. So that's in there. In terms of cash flow, well, I always like to leave this one to the chairman because he really gets excited about this area.
I'll come back to it later on, don't worry.
Yeah, there you go. You just can't burst that bubble. So In terms of the capital expenditure, you'll see that we had budgeted to do around 54 million. We've undertaken 39.9 million. One big part of that was in regards to the Invercargill office. There was 5 million that's been carried forward. So a number of these items in here you'll already have seen. Community resources, the biggest reasons for that, as we've said, is toilets. There's been, the consenting has been slower. So there's about 1.8 million in there. There's a number of, like the Edendale multi-use track, Riverton Playground, Te Anau Lakefront, open spaces work. So there's a number of pieces of work in there that have either been stopped or they've been carried forward in a previous report. Your sewerage scheme, you're looking at Manapori Waste, Balfour consent renewal and the Edendale Wyndham consent renewal. And remember, when we're looking at these numbers, these are the budgeted numbers. So, of course, you did that forecasting process where some of these things have already been moved forward to your LTP. But in this document, we're only ever reporting back to that budget. In transport, it's looking pretty good. The increase, of course, is the traffic services, the extra money that we got for some of that traffic services work. In terms of the financial prudence benchmarks, we did not meet 2 of them. That was the essential services benchmark. So that essential services benchmark is effectively saying, has your capital expenditure exceeded your depreciation? 2 reasons in there. One, as we heard before, the capital program is less than, but the biggest portion of that is because depreciation has increased so much. That's having the impact in that one. And the operations control benchmark, which is an interesting benchmark in that it compares to our budget. And I haven't quite got my head around that one. I just don't understand why we even bother with that one, because it's always a relative thing. And the chair will always, he'll have another opinion on that one. That's all right. I'm only a lowly accountant. In terms of the valuation we talked about, those assets are getting well up there. When I came here, we had a $2 billion party, but of course we're getting right up there now with those. And the infrastructure depreciation, that's fine. And then the forestry revaluation, which is basically with the previous year. Emissions trading scheme, just a bit of a heads up in terms of that. The price has gone up, so the number of units has increased, but the price per unit has also increased from 41.75 to 50.50. So it's gone from 4.6 million to 5.7 million. We still have that project and plan that you asked some time ago to look at whether we do something with those emissions trading credits and utilise them in some other way. Somewhere on my list. Internal loans, just further to be Don's query, wasn't it? Just giving you an indication of where those internal loans have increased. So they've gone from 60 to 67 there. Is it working out right? It's about 70, you said.
Yeah, there's a couple of discrepancies.
Yeah, that's internal loans.
Oh, let's see, you're 70.
Yeah, okay.
75. No, 75
Okay.
external debt.
Got that one? Check that one out. Interest was charged on those internal loans of 4.35, which was what was in that budget. In terms of, and I think that's really us. In terms of the document itself, as you can see, we're still just finalising some of our sections off, which we will be getting onto. Our auditors have come to the office, so they're sitting down with us now. They started on Monday, starting to work through some things, and they'll be with us for about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks here, and then another week or so. Yeah, I don't want to take Robin's thunder on the end of that. So if there's any other questions.
Thanks, Anne. Just the annual report had debt for the organisation at 116 million. That's on page 98. At the end of August, the liabilities, is 165 million. So from 116 to 165 for 2 months, so it's 49 million. Is that right? $49 million increase in liabilities over 2 months, the last 2 months.
Sorry, whereabouts are we talking about here?
Page 98.
Yeah.
The annual report.
Yeah.
Liabilities 116 million. Page 53, the earlier report, page 53, liabilities 165 million, which is an increase over 2 months of $49 million.
Well, of course, we will have done our borrowings, so they will have increased. We will have put at least another 5 into, we did a big borrowing stint, didn't we?
Is this for the investment?
Yeah, some of it was investment, but some of it was just completing works as well, because we remember too that we did purchase some property as well.
With 49 million, how do we get that number?
Yeah, so look, I'd have to go away and do a reconciliation. I have confidence in it, but I'm more than happy to go away and do that reconciliation and just give you full information about how that has changed.
Yeah, I just want to make
because some of it will be in debtors and creditors and things like that.
Table, I think that you've got a really false sense of security about these debt levels. I think you really do need to think long and hard about the direction that this organisation is travelling at the moment. I don't know what you think the end result is going to be for the community with $300 million worth of debt hanging over them, but I can give you an idea that it falls on the people with the lower incomes hardest. Lower and middle incomes. Not
I
good.
think it's unfair to put us all in the boat. You're making assumptions based on what you think we think.
This whole council. But it's led by you, Rob.
It's a bigger issue actually, Don, when you look at the numbers. I think the biggest issue is actually our capacity to fund our day-to-day costs.
Well, that's right. That needs to be considered.
It's actually what we talk about,
Spending.
and joke about, which is the depreciation. If you look at it, and I'll raise it now, because it's not directly part of the annual report, but I always do this comparison. Look at the unaudited, but I'm sure it's correct, Robin. The depreciation of 40.6 million. So that's what we should be ideally funding annually, or rather, we should be undertaking capital work at a renewal rate of $40 million per annum if we are just trying to maintain the asset base that we have. Just work out our net cash flows from operations, they're 24 now. It's not a one-for-one relationship, but ostensibly there should be a level of relationship between 40 million and 24. So we're behind the 8 ball. We knew we were going to be behind the 8 ball because we don't fully fund our appreciation. And we've also got revaluations on top of it. So I hate to say it, but the cost of the price of owning roads, of owning water, of owning asset systems increases on us all the time. We have spent $37 million on CapEx versus the 30, so that's probably not too bad, although 29 of that is renewals and the other is new of service. So in fact, that's adding to it. So that, even if I take the darker end, 29 million, we are not current, and we know that. We know that from Hartley's advice to us about the rating program. We've gone every year for the last couple of years. That's actually the most critical issue I think we have here, is actually being able to meet tomorrow's costs out of today's revenue. That's not the argument. The argument is not. Okay, but it is a question that we will have to deal with in the end. Actually, how do we get that closer? Because at the moment it does say that we aren't bringing enough revenue today of our asset base, and it is going backwards. Yeah.
Follow on from Don's point, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I just do feel as a council, as a group of councillors, that we don't dive deep enough into the actual cost, sitting down with priority, having everything on the table and look at how we do things and where we spend the money. Because I have a lot of local contractors telling me that they don't get a look at the work, and so I don't think as a council we have that debate. That's one thing we can control, and I don't think we've not looked in my time in council into that, how we spend the money deep enough.
And that, I think that's something, again, you've got to think through on the end plan, so I take it forward, take it on board. No, we say we're going to, no? Okay, can we just?
Well, you mentioned the capital works and the roading budget, but those aren't the only expenses this council has. We need to look at the total expense, where we spend money right across the board. It's unfair to blame the capital works, the water, the three waters. I know councils are.
I'm going to be careful, John. This is not capital works in the sense of new assets. This is the spend that we need to make to maintain what we have already got. That's depreciation, and it's at $40 million. So yes, it is part of our capital program. But to maintain what we have, modern parlance, back to basics, stop potholes, we need to spend $40 million, arguably. And we are not achieving that. That's the challenge. And more importantly, even if we achieve it in 1 year, we're not building the reserves fast enough to meet it next year. Because we're only getting net cash flows of 24. Versus only for 40. So, you know, the simplification of the position that we're actually in is not an uncommon one around the country, but it is one that is really affecting us. We've had it for the last two LTP. You know, when you asked, was it 2 years ago? Oh, sorry, it was the previous LTP, Rob. You asked the community what they want. They said we're prepared to spend great more to actually deliver on some of the stuff. It's getting there. But we're still underfunding our. But hey, I'm going to be conscious. I've distracted us, although I think it's been useful because we're going to have a couple of looks at the annual plan. I think this afternoon, thinking of time, we're still dealing with the annual report. It reflects actually, Robin, that there's good information inside this annual report to meet the sorts of things that Derek and I are saying. But we need to get this annual report through. So, can I see, and can I just do a bit of quick guidance from here, or have you got more comments?
I'll just respond back to John's query about the fact that we've gone up 45 million, and we have, and that's in the borrowings. And that is due to, one, the fact that we didn't collect rates money in. We needed to borrow in the short term to fund our operations for that period of time until the rates came in. So there's that, plus there's the investments, plus there's the project costs. So that debt has gone up. You can actually see that just really by looking on page 53. You can see it between the two numbers, between June and August. But you can also see the detail of that on note 7, which is on page 56.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mike.
Thanks, Bruce. I just want to ask Ian a question. You're talking about borrowing when the rates didn't, or films were delayed going out. Just want to ask a question around rate payments. Have we had any issues with rates being paid in the last lot of rates that
there was some confusion with some rate payers about they were ringing up asking have the dogs sort of ate my rates notice when we had sent them out. So that was quite funny. But in terms of the fact, I think it's been mitigated by the fact that we said there was no penalties involved.
But I'm talking about having a lot. Have they been paid? Have we got a lot of people that can't pay them? I've just heard so much.
I think I'd have to refer back to the report that Shelley gave you the last time, that the debt's pretty much on par with previous years, only up by the rate increase. But yes, there's a lot more people that we are working with a lot closely. So that's one thing that I've observed in my team, that I'm putting a lot more resource into working with people.
It's just with this rating round.
Well, and I've also heard that the direct debits, there's been quite a few of those have bounced as well, which are probably a wee bit higher than it was in the past. So yes.
So we'll probably see more of it coming to
Oh, absolutely. From the inflation notice that
might actually support Derek. We need to look at more cutting costs. And I wouldn't be an open argument, by the way. Okay. Anything else you want to say? Can I just look? So firstly, just about the paper. Is there anything in the paper before we get to the annual report that you want to raise? Yes, Darren.
No, sorry, it's in the report.
Okay, just one question from me. It might be to you, Anne. 149. whether to be worried about this the rating valuation. I mean, the rating valuation is secure, but we've lost the evidence. Is that what it's saying? I don't understand what that was saying. Well, I could understand. It said that our rating data is virtual, but once we've gone past a certain date, it's lost, and we're into the current.
So through you, yes.
Sorry, you're trying the answer.
So what happens is the two valuations, the Three Waters valuation and the rating valuation, are done slightly differently. WAR takes a cut of the Three Waters database at a point in time, takes it into their system and runs a valuation in WAR's own system, and then gives us a report back. For roading, they actually do the valuation within our modules, which is usually okay, because actually when we're running the valuation to the point we're getting the auditors in is non-construction season, so there's only little changes going through the database. Of course, the problem we've now got is as we extend further out, we've started to move into construction season, they're starting to make changes in the database and make corrections and whatever else. So it occurred last year as well. The valuer, at one point, the auditors were asking questions about making those, about whether changes could be made. In the end, our auditor was comfortable with leaving it the way it was, acknowledging the fact that if we tried rerunning in the database today, the data hasn't changed hugely, but it's not working off exactly the same numbers effectively.
So what you're really, if I can just interpret it in my terms, we had all the appropriate rating data at 30 June. We ran our current cost indices across it, which, as you say, are reflected in the non-construction season. We've started a new season of construction across the country. If those rates are substantially different to what we have at 30 June, which would lift the value higher than it is currently, we might have a revaluation on our hands. And it would be difficult to do because we don't have the data. We don't have the data stored that we had at 30 June, correct?
Correct. And at the most, the longer we have to wait before we start the audit, the biggest risk we're looking for. The biggest risk is the fact that a number of indices that get used for both actually the Three Waters and the roading valuation are only published 3 months in arrears.
Right.
So the valuer has used the best information, so they've used effectively a March indice along with best known information at the point they run a valuation at late July. Of course, by the time Deloitte have come in, we've now got hindsight of a published indice. So how good was the valuer's estimate?
Database moves, what's plan B?
Last year, the auditors accepted that there was that movement and that actually there was a discussion between our valuer and our audit partner in context of the valuer it was the best information that we had. These were the assumptions we used in the basis to those assumptions, and that was accepted at that point. We have asked the valuer this year, not that I've seen the number, but actually if something moved, what that might look like in the event. The auditors asked that same question.
Keep a close eye on my advice. Okay. Annual report. Sorry, Christine.
Sorry, just in relation to the draft annual report unaudited.
Yeah, that's right.
Will we have a chance to comment further on that when it comes back? There's just a couple of areas, like for example, on page 82, it talks about community board highlights and only mentions 4 of the community boards. And I would like to see that people don't feel left out in that comment, because I'm sure the others have made a contribution as well. And also there are aspects which are to come back to us, such as on page 86, Maori contribution to decision making and fostering Maori capacity, which has been there year after year. I would actually like to see those headings change, and that we can see the progress that has been made or otherwise. And I think those headings probably constrain us a little bit in terms of the work that has been done. So there's just some small comments like that. We'll have a chance to look at that at a later time.
Let's come back to it, because I think it's a good question, because it strikes me the front piece of that Robin has helpfully pointed us to, which is, and you're in, most incomplete part of the total annual report. And Rob and I actually were talking about this last night. We don't actually have Rob's statement in here, and that's actually really important, because you remember we have Rob treated it seriously, and you have been prepared to have the committee open up and discuss that. And we haven't got it, so no complaints about where we're at. We are where we're at, and I agree with you. We need to have the chance to have that before it gets anywhere near before December.
Yes, thank you. That will be good.
Yeah, so we'll come back to how we can just deal with the changes that are going on.
Thank you.
So look, we're into the report. So let's take the up until page, I think it's just 121. There's a sort of summary, the executive summary end, the bit that probably is most tangible for us. And actually, are there any points, questions people want to make about this that Robin and take on board as they finalise? Yes, Darren.
Yeah,
Sorry, you had a point. Yes.
Yeah, I just had a question around KPI 15.3, which is on page 94 of the report, or page 20 of the document. It's about the drinking water compliance and how we only got 30%. I was just reading that and reading the explanation, and actually ran it past a couple of people. And I think there's maybe some wording in there, because the monitoring is what's not creating the assessment, and I know that, but somebody reading that might go, oh, have we got a major problem with our water quality? And I'm just wondering if there's a wording there just to work to test that. I think there's something there that just could be added.
Thank you. I'll take that back and look at the wording on that and work with that.
Any other questions on that first whatever, up 21? Just a comment from me, Robin. The KPIs not met section sort of hit me between the eyeballs, and transparency. But I didn't get it wrong. I mean, you can read the first bit, but I would have been great if we'd had, I thought, some positive statements around KPIs that have been met. Now, I think this might be part of design and geography of where this sits, but while it's important that we are transparent, I don't want to discourage being transparent about what we didn't succeed in. I also think it's important that we balance that with actually what we achieved. And it's a bit like your point, Christine. There are some other good points which I want to bring up. Can I just ask you also just to check this, please, if that's okay. There are things like on page 193, KPI 15.3, it just merely seems to describe the not meeting of the target. It doesn't give you the reason why. We do elsewhere, that's in the other ones, which is, I don't really get the reason why in those two. I think I'd just like to check that we actually do provide the reason that the whole purpose of the statement is actually the reason why, which would be really, really good. And actually, if you go over the page, it's almost like an objective as well, which is project yet started. So clearly, these are ones that we had planned in the year, but we haven't started. We use a few acronyms there, which I think we're best to explain. Not acronyms, words which mean something, like the September 2023 prioritisation process. That means something to everybody in this room, me and the readers. So, if there's an ability to perhaps describe one or two of the key features we did, which gave rise to changes, it then starts to put with proper rationale, a more clear rationale, why these projects were actually started. Okay, any other, I think that was my key point. Any other points on that front book? Okay, so that gets us to the large section. It's a really important section after statement of responsibility, which is the activity statements. They're generally pretty complete, and again, once we've looked through, are there any comments folk would like to make or raise over those? And I've been very grateful that we have a transparency here. No? Yes, Christine.
Sorry, it was just
no, it's fine.
clarification on page 156, and that's the funding and budget variations. It just talks there about local authority fuels tax, but it talks about the budget largely due to the recovery of additional fees for external consultants involved in the Contact Wind Farm fast track resource consenting process. I didn't really understand what that was referring to.
That's the money from the wind farm. There must have been a sizable amount of funding coming in terms of that. It's actually pushed that one over, but it doesn't, I don't know.
So what happens is if we use my understanding, and Adrian might correct me if I get this wrong, if we use a third party in order to process a consent, that means when we invoice it out under a different line, so it comes in showing in that local authority's filter, basically other income. It doesn't fit into one of those other buckets. So my assumption is that we've used a third party. We've now then charged that out to the consent person.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments at the stage on? No? Can we go to the finances? Is there anything, so the financial section starts on page 97 of your agenda. Are there comments or questions about this? Right, Susan, I do have a few, but they're ones which are more just Susan. Robin, let's go. Sorry, Susan.
Not just a Susan, that's fine.
Oh, they're right. Yeah, I'll give you guys a busy right. Look, the first thing I like to ask when we're looking at a draft is, ultimately, we've previously agreed the accounting policies. There's nothing around the accounting policies, how we measure, how we record these transactions that's changed. We're following the same accounting policies we had previously agreed. There's no change. We have heard a couple of key matters around how we measure the result, which is the discussion I had with Susan about the revaluation of the assets, which, as we know, affects the balance sheet and it affects our depreciation. And actually, there is a measurement issue there if we take on board your point about actually if the rates move substantially, even post balance date, we could have a risk that we have to change our view on that. In the accounting policies on page, I'll go back to my notes, 110, we have a policy around provisioning. So provisioning events or conditions that exist at balance date, we haven't paid out on a liability, but we have created a liability through the work that we do. In other words, we owe something, we get paid. And that is a judgment to, well, so again, I'd like to ask the question, because this can't be anything more than actually now, what work have we done to try and pick up and make certain we do all the provisions?
Done the questioning, a lot of the questioning with our managers in that particular area, as well as, of course, we've done all the work with the landfill.
Yes, okay. Perhaps more to the point, from our knowledge of transactions in the course of the year, there's nothing that would appear from our perspective to be unaccounted for, which could be picked up by no event subsequent to balance date, which might reflect a condition that 30 June needs to be.
No.
Okay.
Nothing that we're.
Good. That's not a check. That's just me checking.
Weather events are usually one of the bigger ones.
Sorry, Susan.
Weather events or emergency events sometimes, and yes, we had one of those a couple of weeks ago, but relatively small scale.
Yeah, it's not relevant to. It's not relevant to the financial year. I hear the bad weather. Insurance settlement later. Sometimes often that's around that. Can I take us then to page 260-61? There are contingencies and events after balance date. Again, I want to ask that general question: what work have we done to review completeness of contingencies?
That work is still actually progressing.
Still progressing. Adrian, you haven't got any leaky homes? Good, thank you.
I'm aware of anyway.
No, you don't tend. Doesn't tend to be a problem down here. But I just, that's the sort of question that I think I only want. So all I can leave as a caution, Robin, is the events after balance date. Okay, because we can't conclude that until we get to adopt the accounts in December. So of course, the longer we hold the accounts open, the more chances are that events after balance date, for some reason, gets us, if you will. clearly that's going to be primarily around Three Waters, and you're working how you're going to bring the Three Waters information up. It may also have an impact on actually what we disclose in the events post-balance date note. So if you could just be aware of that, that would be really good. Right, I sense it's the afternoon, folk. Do folk have any other questions on the financials and accounting policies and notes? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, Rob, let's go back to the resolution then, because I think we want to pass a resolution that you pass this on to the auditors, but I think we also just need to know how we're going to get another crack at this, because we want to get what Rob says. Hey?
In the trust.
Mr. Chairman, there's another opportunity. We're planning to bring back the auditor's report in the November F&A.
What is it for November? No, there's no F&A in November. Nice try. So look, we're going to endorse this, and I'm happy that we should, and that we approve the release of this to the auditors. And you've heard it, some comments from us around, particularly the front end. That will be probably at this stage less of interest to the auditors. So I think clearly the activity statements and the financial statements are what they're looking at. So I think we can do that. And we say we delegate to the Chief Executive and Chair of Finance to approve further amendments. That's one way of dealing with this, but I think there are one or two, I'll tell you, but holes that actually everybody needs to see, particularly at 60. I was wondering if there was an outside of meeting basis we could share this around and enable people to comment. Is that possible?
Yes, that's right, Mr. Chair. I mean, there's still some workshops coming up as well with council, as well as there is mailing.
So could I just ask them that in fairness to clearly, it's good to see things are moving, great to have the auditors here, but there's a real chance, I think there's a real chance, and actually we need to support your role, there's a need to support Rob as a council that's accountable for the results to make certain we're happy with actually how the performance of the year is being reported on. So if we could find either by email circulation, particularly the front end, or by workshop, that would be appreciated.
Unless you want to back through our meeting.
I was just thinking if we do it at a council meeting, if Bruce is available, he can come in via Teams.
He's come blind, yeah, absolutely.
So we'll look to put those pages up. It's very easy to put a covering report on that, and we'll liaise with what meeting will suit you most.
Okay, oh, thank you for that. Okay, so with that, we've got those motions all seem reasonable. I'll move from the chair that we essentially are willing to go to the auditors. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Motion, all those opposed, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Well, thank you for that, Robin. It's the LTP, which is big. It's the annual report, which is big. Are you going to do coming back for the annual plan? You do the big bits of planning here and reporting. So thank you very much for your efforts today. That's really, really good. And Robin, that, and I'm sure the colleagues around the organisation as well.
A lot of effort goes into these things. That's just improved around the table, the use of a tie.
Oh, that's impressive. I noticed when you came in, you had a tie on. This is good.
Dress up. Taking a leaf out of Paul's book.
That's right.
True shirt on.
Yeah.
Standards. It's about standards, that's right.
Thank you. Great to have you guys here. So now we're analysing the actual results to forecast for the year. So you, Joe and Matt, we're in your hands. Yes.
Thank you very much. So as already mentioned, this is to check the actuals to the forecast in comparison to the annual report that you've just had that was to budget. The forecast was completed roughly April 24 and approved by Council on the 1st of May. Most of the variances are very similar to the budget, but predominantly to do with the vested assets of about, with the variance of $1 million up, some of the Blue Cliffs recovery and offset by depreciation because of the revaluation of the infrastructural assets. The biggest difference is in community resources is the building of 5.7, which is carried forward, the vested asset drop of 2.8 from the prior year that we're currently reviewing on how to correct. And then under transport is the footpaths, because we didn't get NZTA, they were delayed or removed. Offset by some vested assets that have come in to that section. And yeah, that's pretty much the big variances. So does anyone have any questions about it?
Thank you, Joe. Yes, Christine.
Just in relation to paragraph 19, I did have some questions about that, but I guess that'll come through.
This is capital expenditure for the last year.
For the last year. So if you've got a question, you should ask it.
Oh, it was just that that's quite a given. I thought around the less than what we thought we were going to spend. Is there any general comment on that?
So that was what I was describing in the annual report, that some of that, of course, was moved out as part of forecasting.
Yes.
Because, of course, it was to do with consenting around some of the wastewater schemes. It was also the building, the Invercargill buildings, that accounted for 5.2 million of it, and then there was the delays in the toilets and such like. So, yeah, there is. On top of that, of course, there is a number of other small works, playgrounds and stuff like that that has been carried forward, which will have an impact.
Catch up.
So in terms of the report that you see in December, we'll also though note those all as carry forwards, so it will have an impact on this year's delivery as well, because that of course adds to it.
Yes, which you'll hear in the report.
Which you'll hear in
next month, which is
correct.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Questions, if you carry forward, do you actually catch up?
Yes, which
Right.
we'll have.
That's right, that's right.
Just the Blue Cross recovery that you referred to, that was externally funded though, eh? So there's no actual impact to us, albeit maybe a bit of a time frame variance between the MFE money coming in and our money going out. Cool.
Brilliant. Any other questions or comments, folks? I couldn't help but see on appreciation bent today, paragraph 18, Matt and Joe, where we say the majority of the $4 million over forecast related to increased depreciation. The ongoing cost of holding your assets. Right. Okay. So I did lecture anybody on that. Rightio, that's fine. I feel like there are probably no other questions of that today. Matt and Joe, thank you for the dedication. I think this is actually not always a report I see elsewhere. The fact that you've gone back, you looked at, you told us where you thought we were going to land. This is a really good to have the completeness from the other side of actually where did we land and why was it different to our forecasts. And hopefully it actually adds to the discipline of how you forecast. It's wrong, bad, but you know, you can add to the discipline of how you forecast for us this year, which is really superb. Even when we get to the annual plan. So thank you for your work. Appreciate it. Can we look at the recommendation, please?
Sorry,
Here. Oh, sorry, Maggie.
Number 15, we took environmental services expenditure as 1.1 million under forecast. This main variance is due to staff vacancies across the team within that area. What happens to that 1.1 million? So, I mean, we've rated on it, and so it's sitting there. What happens to it going forward? Are we re-rating again, or vacancies that haven't been filled? Where does that money sit?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that when we are under expenditure, we do also just have to balance that against that income, because that's under projection as well. So there's a net effect of the two.
Right.
But the difference between the two goes off to the district ops reserve.
I guess just for
Before we get that debate, Maggie, what on debate, what are the district reserves?
So further clarification from the back row. Environmental services is very heavily fees and charges funded rather than through rates. So they didn't have the expenditure, they didn't collect the income. Actually, the net amount is potentially not that different. For anywhere else in the business, yes, if we hadn't spent the money, we would be putting the money into a reserve, but in their case, actually the money would still go into a reserve if that's appropriate, because they're generating off rates in the first place.
So, in saying that then if it's not used, it goes into a district ops reserve, and then we budget again, and we're rating again for the same services, for the same, we still how do I word this? So you were saying environmental services is mainly fees and so, but
So for
staff vacancies across the team within that area. So if that goes into the district ops reserve and it's being, and then we do another budget for the following year, we could be in exactly the same position within every, you know, community leadership, community resources, sewage. It's a difficult juggle to.
So there is some, like if I take environmental services, for example, a few years ago when they started doing some work with the building team, some of that work was actually funded through the district ops reserve, was enabled that to happen. We generally do try to avoid funding ongoing operational costs out of there, but you may remember through the LTP that some of those one-off costs that we were seeing coming through, we've chosen to use the district ops rather than sticking it into rates. So we are trying to use that in places that's appropriate as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can we go to the resolution, which I have finally found at the bottom of page 285, which is the received report. A mover and second, please. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Julie. For the motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. Thank you. Right, no problem. No, thank you, Matt. Appreciate your work. Yes, never, what is it? I just say rusty. That's probably a terrible analogy. There's always plans to do. Annual plan. Rob, your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, amendments to the Finance and Insurance Committee. So we're seeking the approval today from the committee for the annual plan 2025-26 project timeline key dates. We'll take the report as read. Can I point the committee to the timetable itself within the body of the report, which is quickly you can see page it is in your agenda.
290.
Thank you. So the community board workshops for the annual plan will be through November the 4th. And then proposing some council workshops, so the one today and any others through November as well. Community board direction setting reports to recommend the local rates, so it's happening through December this year. And then a receipt of the local rates and district budgets to council on in January 2025. Followed by consultation if required, from the 6th of March to the 7th of April. Hearings and deliberations, the 15th and 16th of April, if we move it 2 days. And May and June for a draft and final annual plan presentation to council, to the committee and council. So today, the annual plan team is again asking for approval of the dates outlined in that timeline, and also the rescheduling of the February meetings, so switching over basically the February F&A meeting and council meeting so that the F&A meeting is ahead of the council meeting in February 2025. So the F&A meeting moving to the 12th of February and the council meeting moving to the 19th of February. Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions.
Thank you. So this is a plan to plan, in short. So we put risks against it as well, which would be better. So I think we are consulting, aren't we? I mean, you know, there's always a chance of this is what you and I, Rob and I talked a lot of new things out there in Mahi Tau while we were waiting this morning, but it is highly probable that you're going to have a consultation. We can probably have a water something to discuss, but actually it probably is also wise. We felt, and I'm only reflecting an off-the-record discussion you and I had, Rob, and the sentiment probably is that they need, it's the wrong word, they need to know they've been consulted as well, but maybe it's a policy decision that you've got to make. So that's why I think you've still got to hear if you choose to consult, but I suspect that possibly, I could be way out of scope, it might be wise to do it, but I'll let you guys work that one through. Any comments, questions on the plan? No? Well, that's good. Okay, well, thank you, Robin. There is only one committee meeting, one FMA committee between now and the 12th of February.
Yeah, in the December.
So probably it's a good time if, I think it's genuinely that one of the issues around the plan is can we actually carry it out? We're good at doing that, but actually there could be risks associated with that it could affect the plan. You're welcome to bring those risks and issues back to us here at the committee if it would be useful to get governance support and direction and change. Otherwise, it would be good to see that we're knocking off this timescale here as we go. Okay, that's cool. Right, so the resolution is that there's quite a bit there, but in effect that we receive, we comply, we approve the dates when we set up some meetings, and that also affects the meeting schedule. So, thank you, Darren. Thank you, Christine. Motion was in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you. There's a plan. Good on us. The best for last. Was it last? No. Yeah, I'm trying to get here. I'm trying to get there, guys. Joe, welcome back. Accounting policies.
Thank you.
Come on, Tom.
Yeah,
Come on, Tom.
I'm into it.
That's good at running. You get a high out looking at accounting policies.
I'm like an unregistered dog on the loose.
No, we've got your number, mate. You're an Adrian's return. Yes, Joe.
Don't let Adrian catch you.
So this one is to endorse the accounting policies to be included in the annual plan. The accounting policies will basically stipulate how we are going to prepare the financial data in the annual plan. These ones are based on what was approved in the LTP, being the prospective financial information. Any changes that would have been made would have been associated with those identified in the annual report, which there are minimal. So there's really no changes since the LTP ones. Any questions?
Thank you, Joe. So, actually, you raised a very good point, which, I wasn't trashing at all anyway. Accounting policies, remember, these are accounting policy for what we call prospective information. In other words, we're trying to, these are policies we use to measure what we think will happen, in contrast to the accounting policies in the annual report, which is measuring what has happened. So the column on page 296 to the right is actually really important. It's the key to actually reflecting we are making a whole bunch of assumptions, and indeed we're trying to predict forward as to what our financial results will be. It's sort of the forecast we have been doing before. Okay, so and that does say, amongst other things, that and I think it's really one that I always goes to is assumptions and risks and uncertainties are heightened when you're dealing with trying to work out what's going to happen in the future. We will use best estimates. In other words, we're going to use the best information we have at hand. And there's that cautionary note that even if we use these policies, there's still a chance it won't turn out the way we think it will. So it's just an important part to recognise that. Having said that, Joe, as a sort of a catch-all, a generalisation, the policies we are using that we have when it comes to our annual report.
The only change we've had in annual report is to do with audit fees, which we cannot predict because we don't know who the we know who the auditors are going to be, but what the spend is.
But in terms of measurement, it's all going to be right. Okay.
Well, they're going up anyway.
That'll be, those are some of the key questions. It's not, I wouldn't come all of these, but insurance, for instance, would be a key. Trying to predict what are our costs. And let's face it, some of those ones are our day-to-day costs, which tend to have a more direct rate impact than anything else. A lot of the market seems to be quite soft, as they say, soft and quiet, which is good. Okay, so sense, unless there's any other questions or comments.
Just a weak question. Sorry. I see here about the revenue from water by metre rates on an accrual basis. Do we actually have many meters, water supplies?
We're commercial properties.
Okay. Pretty much most of them, or? Yeah, good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Again, the critical thing then is to estimate volume.
Yeah.
How much will actually be consumed in the coming year? Assumption could be different to what actually is consumed, but that's going to be the basis of the revenue by.
When I clarify that, that's where they're a reasonable consumer. So it might be glass house related or something like that. It's that they're a reasonable consumer as well as being commercial.
Okay, any other questions? As an estimation, you look through all your revenue lines and, like you are with that water, estimate what's going on as well as the expenditure.
He's getting really excited by accounting policy.
Oh, that's right, exactly. Thank you. Which is your way of saying, Bruce, please be quiet and move on. So our role is to endorse the policies. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a second? Thank you, Julie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Rightio. Changes to significant accounting. Oh, it's somehow we could have. It's good. We're already moving into the LFG. Okay, Robin.
Yeah, I could have organised it a bit better. I must have been looking at that myself, thinking, "Geez, Anne, you didn't do that very well."
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance and Assurance Committee. Again, third and final report for the day. So the annual plan team is seeking the review and the recommendation from the committee of the changes to the significant forecasting assumptions that were adopted as part of RTP 34, setting the scene for the annual plan 2025-26. Again, taking the report as being read. Very briefly from me, for the non-financial assumptions, there was only minor wording changes made to update context to the annual plan and to reference any legislative updates since the adoption of the assumptions, such as the water reforms becoming local law done well. Should there be any other legislative changes, the assumptions can be amended or updated until the annual plan is adopted in 2025. I'll now ask Anne to talk to the financial assumptions that we've made some changes.
Thanks, Robin. So there's not a lot of changes either to the financial assumptions, just the typical ones that we sort of have encountered in the past. In terms of our interest rate on borrowings, this can be set by council, so you can choose to set whatever rate you wish on that. In the past, what we've tended to do is try to anticipate where our debt levels are going to be, look at what the interest rates are as of this point in time and go, okay, there's a rough estimate of it. We've done it this time just on the stock that we've actually got as at the 10th of October. So the rate has decreased from that 5.67% that we've currently got in our LTP down to 4.91. So I've just put that in the resolution. However, you can choose to have something different if you so wish to do so. In terms of the investment, it's just a note in there. The 60-40 split is, my new financial controller has highlighted, it's not interest that we're actually receiving, so it's gain or sale it's a gain on the derivatives. So it's actually, I need to take it out of interest received and put a gain or sale column in there. So it's just highlighting there's a 60-40 split between income and growth, so we need to make that accounting transaction. Also, just the return on our balanced funds, I haven't changed that, so we've kept this static pretty much all the time. We said originally we were going to be conservative with what PwC had indicated, which was around 5.5 on balanced funds, less a 1.1 fee, gave us a 4.4 return, and then we were going to see how we went in terms of our returns of it, but we wanted to always be more on the conservative side. I haven't proposed to change that. You can equally do so if you so wish. Forestry assets, it just talks about a previous plan that we're going to base it off, which is not what we do. We just tend to get the latest forest management plan and update it, so it's just an update terminology. And the emissions trading scheme was just an acknowledgement that the units and the price had changed, but not making any alterations to what we had at 30th of June 2024 in terms of that. So that's really that.
Right. Questions or comments on this, guys? Yes, Paul?
I just see in 15 regarding the investments, and it's got that we currently have a return on a 50-50 split between income and growth. And to reflect the current portfolio, this needs to change to 60-40. Is that meant to be policy?
No, portfolio. The portfolio at Westpac and at Milford.
So it's sitting at 60-40 now?
Yeah, that's what they was looking at. Our policy.
So what does it mean, what has a return on a 50-50?
So it's just saying that is, because normally we had so originally we have in there that we're going to get 50% from income, which would be dividends or interest, and 50% from growth in those funds. So the capital,
Okay.
would increase, but actually now it's more like a 60-40.
Oh, yeah, that's the reality.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think Milford particularly, I think Westpac's more fixed, but Milford tend to fluctuate a little bit to meet the market. They've got more flexibility in what they can do.
Thank you.
Again, sort of often normal with your investment policy to have guardrails, like the interest rate fix for debt guardrails, so that allow your investment advisor to move in a band rather than necessarily having a fixed percentage.
Between 40 and 60.
Yeah, so it'll be within a range.
40 and 60 on both.
The Milford process is more
Flexible.
And the question will be when we get that annual return, as we heard from Milford last time.
No, we heard from Westpac last time.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks for that, Paul. Any other questions you'd like to make? No? Well, in that case, let's go to the resolution, please. So those are the significant assumptions. So we are going to endorse relevant wording and the changes to they were in the long-term plan assumptions to enable relevant 2016 plan. So it's a slight tweak here. And we note that any new information arising between now and the adoption of the annual plan may impact the forecasting assumptions noted in attachment A, and will be presented to the committee for consideration later on. They become evident, I guess. Sounds good. I move it. Do I have a seconder? Good. Thanks, Paul. I'll put the motion to all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. I ain't got no more pages. I've got no more pages in my agenda. Have I got them? Can I go? No, I can't. Thank you. Appreciate that, Robin and Joe, about 3 times each or whatever it was for the papers. So thank you for your contribution too to our finances. That's great.
Derek and Teresa, although they couldn't be here today, they've put a lot
Derek and Teresa, yep.
Yeah,
I've seen
along with
Matt
the rest
as well,
of the
so
team.
thanks to Matt too. There's a whole bunch of people. Okay, that's great. We do need to have a chat now about annual plan. Is it wise to take a short break, or do we get straight into the annual plan? How long will it take on the annual plan?
It won't take that long.
Won't take that long, so we do it and try and finish it through.
Can do, unless you want to grab a